Good morning. This is a special meeting of the City of Santa Barbara City Council, Tuesday, June 3rd, 2025. There is a flag, I understand, out on the pier, so let's face that way and do the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. What a great show of faith, just because the flag's in a certain direction, you can't see it. Okay, Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Harmon.
Here.
Councilmember Santa Maria.
Here.
Councilmember Snedden, not yet present. Mayor Pro Tem Friedman, not yet present. Councilmember Gutierrez.
Present.
Councilmember Jordan.
Here.
Mayor Rouse.
Here.
Great.
All right, very good. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, I have 6 total for public comment, and so I'm going to close the submission of slips for public comment, and we will have 3 minutes per speaker. I'll keep the time up here, I guess, unless somebody else has a... You do? Okay. Ms. McAdoo will keep the time, and we'll start with Rich Applebaum, and this is for comments on items listed on the agenda. So, Mr. Applebaum.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. Thank you again, Mayor Rouse, members of council. This seems quite familiar to me. I'm pretty sure I speak for many community organizations, and not only for CLUE, I'm on the board of CLUE, when I say we appreciate the time and transparency the city has put into its many discussions about affordable housing. Kelly, Keith, Barbara, and others have made an honest effort to hear from community groups, and we've also shared our hopes with you in this room, well, not this room, but the other room, many times. But I'm frustrated, and I'm pretty sure I'm not alone. Despite considerable efforts on the part of many community organizations, the needle has not moved significantly since our talks began months ago. Finding $5 million for the Local Housing Trust Fund, an amount that would greatly increase its ability to leverage other sources, remains an elusive goal. We understand the reasons. We know there are many worthy claimants for city funds. We appreciate that you have a huge budget deficit, and I appreciate the way that you've covered it. We realize that alternative sources of funding all come with their costs. We also know that we have a worsening housing and homelessness crisis, which everyone in this room, including yourselves, sees as a top priority, a moral imperative to solve. Yet seriously addressing this problem keeps getting kicked down the road. So I'm frustrated. I urge you to find the funding, surely somewhere in our general fund, our 25% reserves, Measures INC, investment portfolio, or wherever, and Larry Severance will talk more to you about this later, $2 to $3 million additional dollars can surely be cobbled together. Today is your first step in putting together a 3 to 5 year strategic plan. You could begin by prioritizing $5 million for the Local Housing Trust Fund, and then following up when you finalize the budget next week. Even that amount, despite its leverage, is just a drop in the bucket. Here's a proposal. How about coming up with a way that the city staff, members of the city council, and the community could work together over the next year on a long-term strategic housing plan, including new sources of funding, including some radical new sources of funding, rather than the inevitable last-minute budget scramble which we are in today. Somehow when writing this, since I have one additional minute, I'll share a song that came into my mind while doing it. And if Larry had his guitar, he could actually sing it for you.
Hang on just 1 second, Mr. Applebaum. So, Ms. McAdoo, how much time do we have left? Because we have a fair amount of speakers to fill up our entire... Yeah, so if you wouldn't mind.
I'm done.
Okay, thank you.
The lyrics are this: you can't always get what you want, but if you try so hard, you just might find you get what you need. It is time to get what you need.
Thank you for the musical interlude. We appreciate
I
that.
apologize, my timer didn't have the music at the end of
Yeah, exactly. If you could please chime in some...
And
Okay.
Mayor,
Correct. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yeah, you explained that to me yesterday. Once again, this is it for the public speakers list. We have a full half hour, so there's no more being accepted. Thank you. Zoila Cabrera is the next speaker.
Mayor Rouse, if I may make a quick comment before she starts speaking. Since we don't have interpretation, I just spoke to staff, and staff will be distributing a transcript of her comment.
Very
But
good.
they don't have an interpreter on site.
So
So
are you-
if we have someone that can interpret on
We
site, that works as well.
Okay.
But staff will be preparing that regardless for all council members.
And because we are doing translation, we will allow a little bit more than the 3 minutes. Okay, please.
Sí, buenos días a todos. Mi nombre es Zoila Cabrera.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Zoila Cabrera.
Estoy aquí esta mañana para apoyar
I'm here this morning to support
que se hagan más viviendas accesibles
for more accessible housing here.
por muchas familias trabajadoras.
Sorry, she meant affordable for hardworking families here.
Y estoy a favor porque muchas veces estamos recibiendo, ¿verdad? Mucho elevadas rentas y
And I'm in support because a lot of the times many of us folks are having our rents raised unfairly.
y muchos de nuestros hijos y nietos estamos durmiendo bien ajustados en un cuarto para poder solventar la renta.
A lot of families with their nieces and nephews all in one bedroom trying to make ends meet.
Y estoy aquí para apoyar y que por favor todos apoyen para que estas viviendas sean en el futuro, nuestro futuro para nuestros hijos.
And I'm here to support for our families so that we are looking out for our future and have accessible housing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Rob Fredericks?
Good morning, Mayor Rouse and council members. I'm Rob Fredericks with the Housing Authority, City of Santa Barbara. I'm here once again to urge you to prioritize meaningful funding for affordable housing in your upcoming budget and for future years. Yes, public safety, parks, libraries, and other community services are critical, but none of them function without a stable foundation. Housing, a place to live, is that foundation. Without affordable places to live, our workforce, seniors, and disabled residents are left behind, and the vitality of our community suffers. In your last budget hearing, I shared the concerning impacts of the proposed federal budget cuts to affordable housing programs. These cuts make it even more urgent that we act locally and decisively. You've already shown leadership by adopting a strong housing element last year outlining the city's roadmap for meeting the needs of low and moderate income households. That roadmap includes clear action steps like adequately funding the local housing trust fund. Beyond Measure I allocations, I urge you to also consider modest amendments to your reserve policy and explore leveraging a portion of your investment portfolio to support and invest locally in 100% deed-restricted affordable housing. These are prudent and proactive steps that reflect our community values. Thank you for your leadership and thoughtful deliberation today.
Thank you. Larry Severance?
Good morning, Mayor Rouse and council members. I'm Larry Severance, a resident here in Santa Barbara. I'm offering some of these comments personally and some of these comments on behalf of CLU Santa Barbara. You're here to look at long-term strategic planning. My first point is, would you please make a long-term commitment to creating affordable housing for low and very low income residents? Why? First reason is the evidence is visible all around us on a daily basis. Many commuters come and go, and there's people living here without housing. They're prominent symptoms of a housing crisis. Second, community surveys and town halls were conducted prior to Measure I. Affordable housing was identified by our community as a priority along with public safety, and Those priorities were affirmed by the passage of Measure I. Third, a coalition of 7 housing advocate groups currently is endorsing the concept of $5 million per year for the local housing trust fund. You'll be hearing more about that in the days to come, but that includes CLU Santa Barbara. The second main point is, it's one thing to say that affordable housing will be a long-term commitment, but how do you express that? Through funding. So over the past months, I've listened to the City Council deliberate, and I think one thing is clear. Everybody on the council feels that affordable housing is a worthy goal. So we share that. The question is how to get there. And as it turns out, that's kind of a hot potato, because when I've talked some with individual members on the City Council, and said, well, what's your plan? They say, well, what's your plan? So it's a hot potato that is hard to start articulating. I'm going to try and articulate a plan now. These are more my personal comments than clues. I've passed out a copy of my statement so you can follow if you like. How do you get $5 million for the local housing trust fund? Number one, the staff is recommending $1.5 million go into that trust fund. Number two, Measure I also includes $1.5 million for undesignated housing and homeless services. Transfer part of that money, $750,000 or possibly more, into the local housing trust fund. That still leaves a large reserve for housing services. Third, there's an $800,000 surplus for Measure I projected for this first year. Designate that for the local housing trust fund. Next, allocate expected affordable housing fund loan payoffs to the local housing trust fund. Understanding is that could raise up to $1 million. Next, Measure C. Measure C has a lot of public works, including paving to maintain our streets. Defer some of that paving for 1 year or 2 years, reduce the amount by 15%, and you can add $1 million to the local housing trust fund. Finally, there's 3 alternatives for an additional $750,000. One, continue to freeze the 3 police department positions that were not providing essential services when Measure I passed, and or temporarily reduce the city's reserve policy to a 2-year period and use those funds to make the $5 million.
Your time is up, Mr.
Last but
Evans.
not least, budget a small percentage of what's left in Measure C to make up the difference. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda Honigan?
Thank you. My name is Linda Honigman. I'm encouraged that you have a chance to explore how the city can take a leadership role in local actions that can move us in an optimistic direction. We need a vision. We want everyone to have a chance to thrive in the future Santa Barbara, and that begins with affordable, livable, and equitable neighborhoods. I don't currently live in the city, but I co-owned a failing business during the recession on De La Vina. The commercial rents stayed high, even with the increase of vacancies. Out-of-town property owners were part of that problem. In 2010, we had employees who needed 3 jobs to cover student loans and housing. An office manager lost a previous job on State Street because of the recession and retail downturn, so she took a huge pay cut. Some months ago, I shared with council some of the 100 stories that I carry in my head of friends and colleagues who were evicted through no fault of their own, many who are no longer here. It is important to encourage diversity in our population. I love my dog walk where I can interact with neighbors of many cultures. But we also need diversity of ages. We need to stop the decline in younger families and low to moderate income workers being able to live here. All of the above starts with affordability. We need a balance of business, economic, neighborhood preservation, environmental, and social justice interests that will require compromises we are capable of. One way to help that balance is to focus on local. We should prioritize local residents, local workers, and even local profits. Local solutions should include a large contribution to the local housing trust fund, management by our Stellar Housing Authority, public-private partnerships like the Chamber's Master Lease Program, employer housing efforts, philanthropists who can help with community fundraising campaigns, local architects working with Habitat, and this summer with Strong Towns, and future neighbors themselves who have family assets, good ideas, and sweat equity they can contribute. An important first step is to get input from workers who cannot attend events like this. Make sure that you've heard from the majority of our community who are renters and cause constituents and members of the Committee for Social Justice who understand experiences of the unhoused. And welcome younger professionals like members of Strong Towns who have worked on a number of projects that can help us have a pro-environment and pro-people community. Last Thursday, they hosted 50 folks for a trivia night with an active transportation theme. Let's encourage more of that. Many years ago, Santa Barbara led the country in realizing the importance of environmental protections as a result of an oil spill. Now we are at the center of another crisis, and with your help, we can turn things around. Thanks.
Thank you. Emiliano Campobello.
Good morning, council members, Mayor Rouse, thank you so much. I had a whole thought about what I was going to say when I came in, and it totally changed when I got here. I don't see a clock, so please let me know when it's getting low. I'm really about solutions and looking at ways to build resilient community. I've lived here most of my life. My family's really spent a lot of time building in the community. And one of the things that I've been seeing with our budget, we got a budgetary crisis, losing money in a lot of places. And a lot of that has to do with operating costs. Now, there are technologies, personally, since the Thomas fires, 2017, maybe some of you may have experienced that, remember how bad the smoke and everything was. I started researching advanced purification technologies, and there is a technology that is head and shoulders above the rest. It's something that I think should be looked at by our staff to look at what are the best available technologies for mitigating environmental hazards in our facilities, in our vehicles here, and that can save a lot of money and everything because we're looking at all the costs, but where do we save the money? This right here is NASA produced technology that it comes in different ways, and just imagine if through these vents molecules were coming out and we are all connected. As an indigenous man, we're all connected, and it's the air that connects us also. What you're breathing, what you breathed yesterday, we are all breathing now. That's just what science says. And so it's an elephant that people don't like to talk about when it's in the middle of our room, but we can talk about it because there is a solution. Imagine if within seconds those viruses, mold, bacteria, harmful pathogens could be wiped out by sanitizing agents in the air. This also saves on mold remediation, smoke remediation. This saves on sick leave costs for our city. There are multiple places, so I don't want to get into too much of it, but I just want to say there are solutions. I sent out an email, and I welcome any questions regarding this. This is something I've gone deep into. I've had meetings with some of you individually, and I invite more. And also as a CLUE board member, I advocate for the $5 million per year going towards the Housing Trust. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Angelisa Sarina.
Hi, good morning, council members, mayor. My name is Angelisa. I'm a community organizer with CAUSE. We need affordable housing. As many of the folks here already have stated, it's much needed right for so many of our constituents living here in Santa Barbara. What we're asking for is actually low-income housing, with some reports coming in from the LA Times saying that if you make less than $100,000 in Santa Barbara, you are considered low income. This isn't something that is up for debate. It's simply a matter of fact. And consider the impacts of not investing in your constituents, right? Consider the Thomas fires when so many of our first responders weren't able to get into Santa Barbara because they don't live here. Consider teachers who have to be there for their students who aren't able to continue out the entire year because they aren't able to afford the rising rents. Consider even our police officers who come in from Santa Maria and are unable to actually serve the communities they were sworn in to do so. So I would consider you to think about your constituents and their needs, especially during these very difficult times. Thank you.
Thank you. Ana Arce will be the final speaker.
Okay, so on behalf of CAUSE and multiple organizations that have come together to urge the Santa Barbara City Council to allocate $5 million to the local housing trust fund, and also a 1% reduction in required reserves would yield about an additional $2 million to also contribute for the local housing trust fund and homeless services. In 2025 workforce housing study reported that 70% of the county's workers earned less than 80% in the area median income. Many of these were considered very low or extremely low income. As Angelisa mentioned, a family of four needs over $100K a year to meet basic needs in Santa Barbara, yet more than half of families with young children fall below that threshold. Continued support for affordable housing in the city of Santa Barbara. We have seen how providing affordable housing units has created stability in our community, also has contributed back to our workforce, and then therefore contributing back to our local economy and well-being. So when we continue to invest in housing, when we continue to invest in our workforce, then by that byproduct, we then contribute to our economic growth and creating Santa Barbara to be a more beautiful location for folks to come and visit and also live here. And that's all we're asking for decent, livable, and affordable opportunities for folks here in Santa Barbara. So thank you.
Thank you. And that'll close public comment. Ms. McAdoo, would you read the item into the record, and then you had a comment you'd like to make? Oh, okay.
Thank you, Mayor. Today we will have a work session on and do a council strategic planning workshop. The recommendation is that council participates in a facilitated workshop to provide input into a new citywide strategic plan.
Thank you very much.
I'll start again. Nancy Hetrick with Raftellus. I have two of my colleagues here today as well, Janae Janik and Susan Healy-Keene. Council and Mayor, you may recall we had an opportunity to meet and to talk about the future of Santa Barbara and your hopes and wishes for it, the things that you want to continue to move forward and the things that maybe aren't happening currently that you want to provide focus on. Susan and I participated in those interviews together. We also had an opportunity to do interviews with your executive team members as well as to facilitate a workshop that really brought us to today. And so bringing through the themes, understanding the critical points, understanding the background of what you've been focused on really sets the table for what I hope to be a very productive time together here today. So I'll go through some of the logistics and the setups, but I did want to invite Kelly to share comments and her hopes for our time together.
Great. Thanks, Nancy, and glad that you're here and glad we're finally getting this strategic planning retreat underway. I want to just be clear that today's retreat is not specifically linked to the budget the council will adopt in a couple weeks. And so this conversation today is really about informing kind of where we're headed in the next, 2 to 3 to 5 years. Mm-hmm. And for staff, I think it's really important, we'll talk about it a little later on, to understand kind of what does the council want us to focus on, what are the priorities, the projects that are most important, and then it is incumbent on us as staff to kind of say what resources do we have to be able to accomplish that. And then, it is also helpful for us if the council wants to add a new project or a new priority or a new initiative to come back and say, here's the trade-offs. And I think for staff, that is very helpful. So we don't end up in a place where 6 months have gone by and the council goes, hey, have you worked on that? What's going on with that project? And we haven't had a chance to because there wasn't a very sort of open conversation about the trade-offs in terms of staff resources. So I'm very excited. I think today is just the start of the conversation, sort of the framing, maybe the 10,000 foot level of the conversation. And there's a number of steps that will come after this, including additional community engagement and outreach that will happen. And so, I hope that and I know everyone will be engaged today in the conversation, and I look forward to hearing the thoughts and the discussion. So thank you.
Is this being recorded?
Yes, so the meeting is being recorded and it'll be posted on the city's website. So, and unfortunately, this room does not facilitate the live stream, so I apologize for that, but we did make an effort to record it so at least people can watch the conversation afterwards.
And importantly to that question, to that topic, is this is the first step in trying to develop a strategic framework that will inform and guide the city over the next many years. So the work that we do today, talking about vision, the direction you want the city to move toward, as well as the strategic priorities that are of critical need in order to move in the direction of that vision, that's what we'll be talking about today. From here, we'll then engage the community as well as staff to talk about, well, what are the strategies? What are the things that need to happen in order to move the needle? And so that work will follow, as well as an additional opportunity with council to engage on those pieces. And so, as Kelly mentioned, imagine 10,000 feet, and we know that is sometimes not as satisfying as what are we going to do tomorrow, right? But know that this is an important part in that process. And we heard loud and clear, we want to see some action. We want to see things happen. And so we are taking that to heart, and we'll use the information that comes out of today to help really drive that forward. And so a little bit of that context setting. Okay, so I have a few kind of just groundwork setup slides here to get us centered for the day, and then we'll dive right in. But wanted to start with just kind of hearing from each of you around your hopes and expectations for our time together here today from council and from the mayor. It's helpful to hear from each other, I think, to understand expectations, and we will try our best to meet those along the way. And so, I don't know, Oscar, you want to start us off? We'll just do a quick hopes for our time together here today.
Just for this meeting, correct?
Correct, that's right. We'll get to the other hopes, don't worry.
I hope that we can speak on behalf of our residents and be open-minded to the ideas and suggestions that we hear, and that we get some productivity out of it.
Okay, thanks.
I think that we're a council who shares so many of the same values, and I think being able to articulate and share and name the vision will be helpful for all of us moving forward. So my expectation is that we'll at least all have an understanding of what we're striving for.
Perfect.
My focus would be on economic vitality and sustainability, because those economics are what's going to feed the programs we're going to talk about today.
Okay, excellent.
Sorry, that was louder than I expected.
I know, it's always shocking, right? It's an adjustment to the mics.
Yeah. To sort of speak more broadly than specifics, my expectation is that we come to some agreement about how we want to move forward. I think we've had these conversations a lot, and my expectation would be that we would come out of something that actually has legs and meaning to us collectively moving forward, as opposed to just for the afternoon and then it sort of gets shelved. So that's maybe a longer term expectation, but my goal and hope is that we put something together that is meaningful enough and reflective enough of a shared vision that it actually impacts the way that we think about our work moving forward.
Love it, thank you.
Well, it's no secret that I'm not a big fan of even today's stuff. I don't like the word goals, I don't like the word values, don't like district elections, I like things in a big picture.
Maybe he would like the beach balls that we talked about earlier.
But
right?
what I find after sitting through many of these is there's a huge disconnect. Everybody agonizes over the value, over the goal, even over the implementation steps, and then walks away and loses sight of it after that, and either because the idea is just crazy and staff just goes away and puts it away somewhere and waits for it to come up, or the idea is so complicated that staff can't find a way to get there without continual help and pushing. So I think I'm saying what you've heard other people say, only in my way, is that You know, we have these things and we have values we all agree with, and then we get lost in the implementation, and then doubly lost again in the engagement between electeds and staff who are actually doing the work. And so that needs to improve for these type of sessions to be of more meaning.
100%.
My goal and what expectation for the group would be for us to come together and create a solution to invest locally in our economy. Similar to what Mayor Rouse mentioned, economic vitality is key, especially with the cuts in federal funding that we're seeing. And so my goal is really making sure that we are aligning our values and the things that our constituents are asking for with realistic funding sources and just realistic solutions here locally, and making sure that we are taking care of each other and creating a sustainable economy here locally with what we have.
Okay. Excellent. Well, I do appreciate that, and I do recognize that if you're not moving to action from this, then why are you bothering with it? And I know that you have been through these sorts of conversations in the past. We can talk at the end of our time together as we're closing up. What are the next steps from your perspective? You know, what's going to be most meaningful? We have a plan of work, really with the objective of operationalizing the priorities that come through this process. But we're taking time to really think about that and have clarity. You've got your department head team here listening to the conversations today as well, which is going to be important for that next step. So thank you for sharing your thoughts, and we will drive this forward in a way that hopefully feels connected and productive. You know, we want to make sure you're getting something out of this. Here's our agenda for our time together today. We're scheduled to go till 2. And we'll have some breaks and have lunch involved as well. So we're starting off with kind of laying the land, what we're doing right now. We'll give a little bit of an overview on strategic planning and our process, kind of how we got to where we are today, but then going forward, just level setting the conversation as to what we're talking about here. We'll share with you some of the engagement themes that we heard, and that came through our conversations with each of you, as well as the engagement that we did with staff, as well as looking at the National Community Survey results and a whole host of many resources that you have in place in terms of planning documents and resources. And so there are a lot of efforts have clearly been invested in moving forward. We want to bring those together so that you can realize and celebrate some action related to them. So we'll share some of the high-level themes, again, just to set the table for our conversation. We'll then talk about vision. So, you know, what is the direction? How do you name that? What does that look like? You will find that we did engage with the department heads, and so we have some ideas of where to start, right? Some sample vision statements that reflect some of the themes we heard, some of the things that appear to be most important for moving things forward. So you'll have an opportunity to look at that. You know, what do you like? What do you dislike? What resonates? What's missing? We'll have some conversation around that. Before we do that, actually, I should add, we will be taking you through an activity because we know how much you guys love activities, a couple of you in particular. I mean, we couldn't not, right? But it's intentional. I'm not naming names. There are no beach balls, although if you don't behave yourself, we might get beach balls. But we will do an activity that uses Post-its just to to find out, you know, individually what are the things that, you know, you really want to preserve and love about Santa Barbara, and what are those things that are just not there yet and that you want to really work on. So we need to name those things. From there, we'll then reflect on the vision statement. And then we'll get to the area that I know you'll be most interested in, which is getting to the strategic priorities. What are the things you want to focus on? And really specifically talking about within those areas, what does success look like? You know, we can use words and name economic vitality or housing and homelessness, but that might look different depending on where you sit and who you are. So we want to have that shared conversation around what does success look like? What are the things that are most important? So that will wind us down today. We will be capturing notes, some on the wall, some on the computer, notes everywhere, in order to inform our next steps. And so please feel free to jot down your notes along the way. But know that we will be summarizing these. This will then come back to you as a tool, but also importantly to inform our next steps in the process. So that's our agenda for today. We'll close up and wrap up, if all goes well, by 2 o'clock. Does that sound okay? Questions on the agenda?
Quick question.
Yes, please.
Will we be having those notes sent to us as council members, the ones that your team is taking?
We can. We will work through Kelly and
thank
we
you.
can share those around. Yeah. It's just kind of a summary document that leads us to the next steps.
Of course.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. So that's our agenda. We do, because this is a workshop, right? You know, we are mic'd and such, but you notice we're not at City Hall. And so we want to make this as engaging and dialogue focused as we can, so that so we have set some norms for our workshop, our time together. So nothing that should be crazy, I don't think. Really spending time listening to each other, understanding different perspectives. You spend time together, but a lot of it is often in a formal setting, with less flexibility to really engage. And so we want to take advantage of that time to be able to listen and engage with one another. Staying focused, I promise you, we'll take breaks and the chairs may be a little uncomfortable. And so if you're getting a little stiff and you need to stand up, let me know. We can take a break or feel free to stand up as well. So we want to make sure that you are able to engage and not be distracted by other outside things. Being open, really understanding and listening to each other, to new ideas, fresh perspectives, ways to get things done perhaps, and so we want you to engage. We'll be listening for areas of consensus, particularly when we're talking about vision, when we're talking about strategic priorities. Where are the common threads? Where are the things that connect across council? And so we can start to name those things. That gives us our roadmap as we're moving forward. And then lastly, I didn't bring beach balls. I'm so sorry, Mayor. But I do hope that we can enjoy the process, right? And so, we want to have time, and you're investing your busy schedules into today, into our time together. So hopefully we can have some fun along the way as well. Sound good? Any objections to any of those norms for today? Or anything we need to add? Okay, great. The last thing, is we use a tool we call the bike rack. Sometimes there are topics, issues, ideas, things that come up that really need more time than we have available today. And so we don't want to lose those ideas. We want to make sure that we honor them. And so we have a bike rack back behind Janae on the wall so we can capture those ideas, and we'll include those in the summary report that we prepare. So anybody should feel encouraged to say, hey, I think we need a bike rack, fill in the blank, so we don't lose it. That helps us to manage our time together with still keeping those ideas together. See, already we're needing to stand up. I get it. All right, so that's the bike rack tool. So let's get started with something fun, right? We'll do something fun. It's not a goal, I promise you. Also not value. But I want you to kind of think about, what are those things that just make Santa Barbara so special? What are the things that you love about Santa Barbara? We want to kind of capture those ideas and kind of bring them into the room, because those are the things you want to really honor and cherish as you're moving forward, right? So anybody can start. The natural environment. Not the sirens.
I'd second that one. I'd say the physical characteristics of Santa Barbara. Being able to complain that you really have to drive 7 miles to Costco in Goleta is a really bad thing, because in Santa Barbara you can get from one side to the other in 3 miles, and you can go from the oceans and the beaches to the mountains and all our parks and downtown that is generally a great walkable experience compared to being downtown in other cities our size. Medical and cultural, those type of things here. If you just put a list together, we bat well above our batting average for a city our size anywhere in the country. And I think that takes work, so people do work to keep it that way, but that's the big benefit of Santa Barbara.
Yeah, so the access to all of those resources and amenities, from the natural environment to cultural activities and Costco and all things between, right? Yeah, that's great. Yes?
I think our strong community fabric and network of that's, generational, that we're a community who looks out for each other and really wants to stay connected. And I think that's why we are able to care for the environment or other things, because we have a strong enough fabric to keep that.
Yeah, that strong sense of community and support.
So aesthetics, once again, on natural environment, history of how we developed, and also community in terms of philanthropy and the number of nonprofits and what we do here, what people will do for each other. It's a very, very tight community. There's 2,000 plus nonprofits in a community of only 90,000 people, so
Yep.
pretty impressive.
Very impressive. Absolutely right.
The amount of events that happen
Okay.
on almost any given day, but especially the weekends,
Mm-hmm.
and how bikeable the city is.
Yeah.
I love how I love how culturally rich it is here, and it doesn't take very far for you to walk and just find amazing restaurants, and just the fact that there aren't that many big chains here. I mean, the majority of the places that we love and adore are locally owned. They're owned by local families, and you know, they've probably been here for generations, and there's so much diversity and rich culture and history in that, and I really love that.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's very personal. Megan.
I also love the pace of life here. It's much, much slower than many other places.
Lucky.
Yeah. It's a little slower though.
Did you have something else you wanted to add? No. Just some commentary to the side. Okay. Anything else? Okay. I mean, that's a pretty good list. And when I like what you said, Mike, too, about, you know, hitting above your rank. That's not the words you use, but, you know.
Batting above your average.
Yes, thank you. I knew it was something sporting related. But you know, all of the assets and the resources you have, as well as the connectedness of your community, really makes it a unique and special place. And that's something, as we're thinking about future direction, what does that look like? You want to be able to also hold on to those pieces, right? And so that you're amplifying those things that you love about Santa Barbara and not making it too much of a pivot. Okay, anything anybody else wants to add related to those things that make, yeah?
It's sort of like a mini diorama of a bigger city that has everything. Like, you know, big concerts come here, or cultural events and arts and letters, and we have a major university, and it's small, and the pace is nice, and it's livable and walkable, but it also has all of those things, museums and art and performances.
Yeah. And coupled with the environment, right? I mean, which is also just a unique and special quality. Okay. You got all that, Janae? That's a lot of stuff. That's great. Okay. Well, I think it's always, you know, valuable to kind of land the things and think about those things you love about a community as you're starting a strategic planning process, because, again, you want to keep those always in view. So have those available on the wall. All right, so strategic planning, kind of just a little bit of context setting, and I know you know this, but just for the benefit of everybody having the same conversation around what we're talking about here, I wanted to provide a little bit of level setting here. So when we do strategic planning, we like to think, you know, we're really answering 3 questions, right? 3 questions are important to contemplate. What do we know to be true today? You know, what are those, and we talked a little bit about those things you love, but even the things that are hard, that aren't working well. What is the current context today? That's our jumping off point. What do you hope will be true in the future? You know, what are those things that you're striving to create, that you want to celebrate in the future? And so that's the future direction, and then how will we get there? And so you need those first 2 questions in order to get to the what are we going to do? And I know that there's a lot of energy to move to action, and that is absolutely the purpose of a strategic plan, is to be able to create forward momentum and make progress. But we want to start off with what's our current context and where do we want to go? That way we can then back into the question of how are we going to get there? What do we need? What needs to go well? So for the framework for shared vision and strategic priorities, that's the context setting of this strategic planning effort, what we're going to be doing with you all, and then providing feedback or engaging with the community and with staff. Here are some elements. And so first of all, we want to be able to articulate in a way that everybody can get excited about, feel inspired about, and see yourself and your community in around a shared vision. We want to build on prior efforts. We don't want to, you know, put a pin in all those things and be like, hey, never mind, right? So we have really been intentional about looking at your prior council priorities, looking at, you know, large planning efforts that are underway, looking at the work that was done through engagement surveys, these sorts of things. And so building on those pieces and starting to put the puzzle together in a way that can be most productive. We want to define what success looks like, and that's what we'll do when we start talking about strategic priorities, so that we're not just using words that everybody agrees to, but maybe there's a little bit of opaqueness to it. We want to define what that looks like. That helps us to then create implementation plans and create a space for Kelly and her team to say, well, what are the resources that it's going to take in order to move these things forward? Getting improved alignment in the organization. This is one of the goals that we heard from Kelly and from the executive team, is really to make sure that everybody's rowing in the same direction. Cities are complex, right? You do everything. And again, hitting above your average, if I got that right, means that you're doing a lot of different types of work. It's a little mini conglomerate that you are operating here. And so it's important to get everybody swimming in the same direction and understanding, what are those highest priority efforts that you want to focus on. All of the day-to-day work, that continues, right? That's just part of the fabric of how the city operates, but it's the above the waterline piece that we want to talk about here, and we want everybody to be clear and understanding of what that is. And then creating a system for shared accountability and reporting. And this is a team sport. Leading an organization from an elected perspective, from a staff perspective, it's together that things happen. And so that's an important part of the context that we want to keep in mind, that everybody has to get in line and then hold each other accountable. So you are holding each other accountable as elected members of the organization, as terms of these are the things we said we want to do. This sounds nice, but it's not aligned to where we want to go, just as staff needs to do the same. So this gives you a framework for doing that. Here are some of the hopes we heard for the strategic plan when we were engaging in our interviews. Some of this we've already touched on a little bit this morning. So first of all, establishing a united long-term vision so that you're not just reacting to the shiny object that might be coming through, but you have some clarity around a longer-term horizon, a clear, actionable plan. And again, I said this earlier, but underlining the actionable part, I think is, from what I have heard for this body, is particularly important. And I know that Kelly and her team share that perspective. So I want to make sure that things are tangible and actionable. And then strengthening internal collaboration and culture. One of the great benefits of a strategic planning process is, in fact, the opportunity to bring people together through engagement activities, through discussion around who are we, where do we want to go, through discussion around what are our shared expectations of working together. And that's really culture building, and that's important work. And so I'm of the view that a strategic plan as a document, yes, important, gives you the map, gives you a roadmap to work from. Process to create one, if done well, is equally, if not more important, because it helps to get everybody moving along in the same direction. So that's what we heard in some of the hopes for the strategic plan, and our hope is that we can help to support you and get you set up for long-term success. Okay, so I mentioned the team sport, right? The team sport of getting work done. So I like to share this image because I think it illustrates well the balance that's necessary between the elected body and the organization itself, and recognizing the constraints and the opportunities within each. So in this Venn diagram, you see political acceptability. Those things that together as a body you identify as important, they're strategic priorities, it's a vision for the future, you're in agreement. We want to do these things, right? And they can be bold, or they can be, tweaks. They can be anywhere in between, but there's agreement and shared acceptability around that. One side of the diagram. Administrative sustainability. Okay, well, what is the capacity and the wherewithal to get it done? Do we have the resources? Do we have the systems? Do we have the right people in place? What are the things that are going to be necessary in order to move things forward? And it's where those two things come together that the magic happens, right? And so it's only where you have the resources and the administrative support and alignment, along with council direction and agreement, that you're going to have some action. Yeah.
Is it okay to ask questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess one of the things that I'm struggling with is this concept of political acceptability. If we're talking at a 10,000 foot level, I think that we can surely find things that are politically acceptable and unanimous. It's when we drill down where there's real differences. So today how do we manage that disconnect? Because when I say affordable housing, and everyone here agrees, I guarantee you it means 7 different things.
Yeah.
And so what are we doing today, I guess, to manage the difference between that and what is actually politically acceptable? They're very different.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a good point, because how do you define politically acceptable is what you're saying. And so what we're going to be doing today is, so if we say, housing, right, housing options, that's something that everybody can agree is important, then having a conversation around, well, what does success look like? And let's start to define that and find where there is commonality, where can you get agreement? And so that's where we'll be today. What this looks like then, in the next steps of this process is through engagement activities about what are the options, what can we fund, what are the resources that are available, how do we do some of those things, what's most important. That then comes back to you as a part of the plan in order to get agreement on that.
So it would be like this afternoon that we talk about a policy idea under the 10,000 foot.
So this afternoon when we talk about the strategic priorities and preview, housing might be one of them. Chances are, right? I mean, chances are that was the first thing we heard from everybody that's important.
Economic vitality, that also means different things.
Right, exactly. So what we're going to do is we'll, first of all, affirm my words, actually Stephen Covey's words, but big rocks, right? What are the big things you want to focus on that are important for moving things forward? And so once we have agreement on the big rocks, then we'll need to talk about, okay, well, what does success look like to you guys? And that's where you can talk about methods of moving the needle forward. We're not making decisions today. We're gathering information that then we can bring and test with the community, with the employees, and kind of build it out from there. So today we want to get the ideas in the room and define success.
I will say that, yes, if there's a specific initiative or policy that you think would drive success, that's something you can bring up this afternoon. So I think, like if there's the broad category of economic vitality, if you have specific ideas or policies, put those out there.
Yeah.
And as Nancy said, that's what will get tested in the community with, kind of what would that look like from an implementation side on the staff perspective. And then we'll kind of bring all that data back to the council for further refinement.
And does there have to be a majority support for those ideas? Sorry, I think these are real issues.
So today we want to have the conversation around what the ideas are, and we want to name them. Where there's consensus, we want to be able to recognize that. Where there's not consensus, we can still capture the ideas that have been identified as important for success from your perspective or from your perspective, and then through the engagement activities we can start to test them more broadly and then bring that back. And so we're not landing the plane today in terms of specific policies, but we want to get them into the chute, if that makes sense. Does that help or no?
I mean, it does. I think this is exactly the problem we run into every time we've had this conversation.
Okay. No, it's a perfectly appropriate fear. And so and let's make time at the end of our time today to talk about what are those next steps in order to not hit the barrier, right? You don't want to hit the false stop. But we need to kind of, trains are coming. We want to start off by, nobody gets to escape. Close the doors. But I think we need to have the conversation first in terms of the big pieces. And so we'll revisit it. And I hear you. I know I understand and appreciate the challenge on that. Don't apologize. This is what we need to have in the room. So, okay. So anyway, I just want to land on with this part. I mean, the other thing I would just say is that with the Venn diagram, the more of the overlap that you can create, the more you're going to get done, right? And so if you have a little sliver and it's like, we're way over here, with all the things we want to do, and staff's like, whoa, we have all this core service stuff that we have to do, we have no additional bandwidth, that's a problem. And so we want to try to move the overlap to be a bigger kind of unified space. It's never going to be one-to-one, most likely, but we can get a lot closer. So, okay. Questions on this? All right. The other thing I just like to remind, and I will do this and I will let Kelly talk about it in terms of the organizational context, is just the reminder. You've probably seen or heard of this analogy before. It's not new or innovative necessarily, but the iceberg analogy for getting services done, right? So below the waterline, that's the day-to-day, activities that the city performs. Responding to calls for services, issuing permits, operating a program, all of the things that are just happening on a regular, seamless, hopefully, way. And so that's not what we're talking about here. That continues. If there's something that needs to change or is not working, maybe it's a priority, but those things that are functioning well below the water line, we're not talking about those. We're talking about the little peak above the water, which is what we want to make better or do more of.
And I just wanted to add onto this because if you think about our city organization, we have 1,100 employees. But most of those folks you never see on a day-to-day basis. The folks that are above the water line, there's probably about 50 or 60 staff within the organization who work on the council priorities. So even though people think, oh, the city has 1,100 employees, why can't you get all this done? It's because they're making sure that the water leak is fixed. They're making sure the 911 call is answered. They're responding to, crimes in progress, responding to fires. So I think it's important to remember the resources that are available. And that's what this exercise is about today, is really kind of how do we make sure that what's above the water line, we have the capacity to be able to do. And I would also point, like, the day-to-day operations piece, if that's not running smoothly, then the folks above the water line are having to pay attention to fires that are coming up in the day-to-day operations. And so, I think we've all had a lot of conversation about the permit process and how, that facilitating that to ensure that the housing goal gets met. And so maybe that becomes, an initiative, like how do we streamline permitting and what does that, maybe there's effort around that. And so we've got to make sure that the day-to-day operations are functional and operating well, because then that frees up department heads so that they can actually work on the strategic forward-thinking work, and they're not putting out fires every day. And so I think the two play really importantly together.
Yeah. Questions or comments on any of that? Okay. So last of this kind of contextual actually one more behind this, is kind of how this fits into a lot of the different plans you have, and this is just illustrative. There are many plans that you have in place that you're working on, but you can see, over on the long horizon, you have a general plan that guides the vertical development of the community and what you want to create. That's a long-term play, and that is something that informs a lot of what is happening, but it's not something that is tactical in the day-to-day. Other strategic plans, the CIP, master plans, those things with longer horizon that maybe are moving in the forward direction of the general plan. Again, 5 to 10 year horizon, a little bit longer. What we're talking about here for your strategic plan is right there in the sweet spot, 3 to 5 years. So you want to have enough of a horizon that you can look farther out, but also to be practical and something that you can make progress on. You can celebrate milestones along the way. These then inform your annual budget setting, your annual priorities within a strategic plan. What are the things you want to fund and move forward on? And of course, then the work of the departments. And so individual operational plans and how work is delivered. And so just kind of the context of where we're sitting here. So we're flying at a certain level, but not as grand or as long-term as something like the general plan.
And Nancy, if I could I think the other thing that the department heads and I have talked about is once the council has their strategic plan, each department having their own also strategic plan that ties into that. And that's super helpful because it's that sort of organizational alignment so that we're all working towards the same objectives and goals. So it's sort of, taking this strategic plan and then departments being able to use that to develop their own strategic plans.
So just looking at this, I think it's encouraging that the foundation of all of this is the general plan. Like we wouldn't make a strategic plan that was at odds with our general plan. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I mean, all of these things ought to nest, right? And so one kind of drives to the other through this process. And then, okay, the last bit of piece here. So strategic framework elements. Your vision and strategic priorities, these are the things that are directed by council. These are the big areas of direction and focus that you're providing to staff. It's informed, through the work of staff and through engagement activities, but at the end of the day, you are setting the direction on this. And so the vision, which we'll talk about, is aspirational. It's something that you are trying to create. It ideally has a longer horizon, but it's also something that feels unique and special and memorable to Santa Barbara, that it's not just a generic, where are we sort of situation. And then the strategic priorities, those are the big rockets of things. Woo! The big buckets of things that must go well in order to achieve that vision. And so those are the things we'll be talking about today. The things that will follow are those actions, the strategies that you'll pursue. We're going to introduce the conversation about that today, but we also want it to be informed by staff and by the community in terms of what's realistic and also what's most important from different perspectives. And so we'll bring those pieces back to you subsequent to our time together today. All right. Questions on any of that initial framing? Oh, yeah. Well, I go back.
We don't have these slides, right?
No, we can make them available though. And they will be recorded also. I will also point out those two pieces that are gray are not the things we're working on right now. That is something that could happen down the road in the organization. But that's kind of the purpose of the city, capital C organization, and organizational values. Those are things that really drive how staff works together and the purpose and intent behind it. And so that's another area of opportunity for building culture and building people together. So we're staying at the top part there. Okay. Okay, engagement themes. I promise I won't just talk at you guys. I'll tell you, this is still kind of context setting, but I wanted to share some of the themes that emerged through all of the engagement activities that preceded our time together today to kind of get us oriented to the things that may matter most as we're talking about vision and priorities. All right, so first of all, I mentioned, we had an opportunity to connect, and Susan and I spent a day here, and we want to just kind of illustrate some of the high-level themes that stood out. We'll go through also strengths, challenges, and opportunities, but kind of big picture. Universally, we heard housing. This was something that, and again, it looks different depending on the person, and we heard that in the conversation, but the importance of access, affordability, attainable housing really came through as something that is a big priority here. Also downtown revitalization and State Street in particular, like getting to action, really wanting to see movement in this area. Economic vitality more generally, you've got a waterfront, you've got other developments that are in other parts of the city, but the high energy was really on State Street and downtown. And then within the organization. Hey, Eric. Here we go. Isn't it nice to be at the front of the classroom when you walk in? We're glad you're here. Just doing some review of engagement themes. But so the other issue that we heard about was, and you touched on a little bit relative to having staff available to respond in emergencies, but just the recruitment, retention, the morale of the organization, making sure that you have the resources that they are invested and connected. So really honoring the need to invest in the organization. Those are the three top things that really kind of bubbled up across all interviews. Yes.
Can I just add that I think it was important in the interviews that with the baseline understanding that the bottom of the iceberg priorities stay the priorities. I think that was like an important key.
Right. No, and maintaining core services, absolutely right. Yeah, and that would be a good point to add to this, and we can share that as a part of the report out too. So maintaining core services in addition to all these things. A real desire to move to action. I think we've made that point here. That was also clear from all. And then the need to answer who are we and who do we want to become, right? And so kind of getting back to the essence of what does it mean to be Santa Barbara was something that I also heard. So those were some of the themes that came through the council interviews. I'll go quickly through some of the themes that came through in the context of strengths, challenges, opportunities. And this is a combination from the council interviews, but also interviews that we conducted with department heads. And so it's a shared sense of overview. So greatest strengths are people. So the staff and the caliber of people that are invested in the organization and in the community is a big strength. And arguably the people beyond the borders of the proverbial city hall also. So it's the strength of the community. The reputation. and a lot of pride behind the reputation for the city of Santa Barbara, and tourism, I think, kind of ties in with that too. It's also a strength, identified as a strength. Commitment to sustainability and natural environment. You know, you have been a leader in this area for so long, and so there's a lot. It's a strength, but also something people take great pride in. Responsiveness, high functioning city. That's the core service area you don't want to lose. You know, being high touch and responsive to residents. And then community support. You know, the passage of recent measures illustrates that as sort of a testament to the support you have of the community, and so also a strength. And the philanthropy that you mentioned, Mayor, you know, also I think kind of ties in with that support of the community. So some strengths to lean in on. Some challenges that need to be addressed. You know, housing. So this is housing affordability, access, availability, and we heard some of that this morning already. That's a challenge that needs to be addressed. Aging infrastructure and potential climate impacts on, not even potential, just climate impacts on your infrastructure. The rising cost of doing business, and that's affecting organizations everywhere, but just costs more to do stuff. And so that's a challenge to overcome. Staff recruitment and retention has been a challenge. The State Street vitality and getting that, you know, moving forward on the plans for State Street. Meeting community expectations. You've got a community with very high degree of expectations, and so maintaining and supporting that in a way that is sustainable and doesn't burn people out so that you're not able to maintain core services. And then some discomfort with change we also heard about. You know, there's a way that we do things, and why mess with that, right? And so that's a challenge. And so when you're trying to do something different and you're trying to move the needle forward, that's a challenge you're going to have to address and overcome. Okay, so some opportunities, and this will move us up probably, you know, down the road into the priorities and the vision. But so downtown revitalization, organizational alignment, making sure your organization is set up in a way that has the ability to execute on the things you identify as most important. External partnerships, really leveraging those in a way that is conducive to moving the needle forward. Innovative funding strategies, being creative in how you are tackling the resource needs of the organization, advancing projects with allocated funding. So this is about the execution piece, right? Making sure that you're not just developing plans, but you're actually making progress. That's an opportunity that needs to be moved forward. Restructuring and rethinking services, and so this is about the organizational alignment and how you're operating as an organization. Educating and engaging the community and capitalizing on new leaders with fresh ideas. And so you've had some changes in leadership, including your city manager, which can create opportunities, and we heard that through the interviews we had, that it's a fresh start. So those are the opportunities that we had identified. Oopsie. I wanted to just kind of show where there's an overlap, you know, where there's kind of some shared perspective. I mentioned we looked also at the National Community Survey. It's from a couple years ago, and so it's not like yesterday's news, but it is relevant here. And so from the stakeholder groups, from council staff and community members, there were some common themes. I think it's helpful to know where there's overlap. And so shared concern about housing, and also shared desire for improved economic health and vitality. So those were two big things that emerged throughout. Focusing on core services, also a shared emphasis, and appreciation for the natural environment, and then an active and engaged community. So some of the themes that are kind of broad brushstrokes that I think are helpful for where we go from here. Okay. I will, actually, I have one more, then I'll go to the next discussion slide. So I mentioned the department head workshop, and I would invite, you know, Kelly or the department heads to share any perspectives or thoughts that came from that also. I apologize for the many words on this slide, but wanted to kind of share some of the takeaways that came from that. And as I mentioned before, the draft content that we'll be working from is informed from that process as well. So, you know, what we have now, responsive and dedicated staff and an engaged that support and engaged community. Resiliency in the face of change, and so the ability to adapt and shape is something that came through in the conversations with the department heads. Now that has a tipping point. When you push too hard, it can be a problem. Stewardship of natural resources and beautiful and safe community, and multiple long-term strategic long-term projects are some of the things that came through in terms of what we have now. But hopes for the future, creating a balance between core service delivery and major initiatives. And I want to just kind of pause on that for a moment, because this was a really big deal for staff to recognize, the combination of the below the water and the above the water, and making sure that it's open, it's transparent, there's an awareness of what it takes to do all of the day-to-day operations and the core services to meet community needs and expectations, just as you're moving forward with major initiatives. And so having that level set came through as something that was of great importance to department heads. And that's part of the second bullet there, establishing an understanding for resource limitations. That's where we want to get the overlap of the Venn diagram in place. Also hopes for the future, increased fiscal stability, making sure that you have a healthy financial forecast and can continue to do the work. Developing strategies to address housing and homelessness concerns, and so really being able to drive that forward. Employee recruitment and retention, and then downtown vibrancy with a focus on State Street. So those were some of the hopes that came through the workshop, and you'll see that. So I would ask, first of all, Kelly or anybody from the department heads that participated, is there anything else you'd want to emphasize or highlight?
I mean, I think it's just clear that there is already a lot of alignment between the council and the department heads, so that was reassuring.
Mm-hmm.
I do think we did have a lot of concern about that resource balance, and so making sure, how do we best communicate to the council the limitations of resources that we have, because I think there was a concern that we have not been doing that effectively, and so how can we do that better, just to make sure we're meeting expectations, and like if we need to slow down on a project, how do we communicate that to council, so that, and then how do we create those priorities and that prioritization.
Well, and as when we talk about strategic priorities later, through that conversation and even the interviews that we all had, it seemed like it's worth naming as a priority, focusing on the health of the organization so that you're supporting recruitment, retention, quality, service delivery, all of these sorts of things. And that's not something that has been a part of the prior priorities. Anything else that you would want to clarify or add? They're like, no. Okay. Okay. We just want to make some space in case there was. And so, so with that, so those are the themes. I'm sure no big surprises, but I think it's helpful to get them all kind of shared in the room so you're looking at that together. So, interested in observations or comments from council? What stands out? Is there anything else that you would want to emphasize or add? Mayor.
Yeah, I just think, I think it's part of your upcoming thing, but the definition of what success looks like for everyone, because I think we can actually come pretty close to some kind of consensus on that.
Yeah.
The pathways to that are going to be pretty divergent. But the overall success, what does it look like in the community? What does housing look like? What does homeless services look like? What does our staff look like? I think we can get pretty close on all those things, and then figuring out how to get there is going to be the interesting part of the journey.
Yeah, and it is a journey. Yeah, absolutely.
I think in all of this, what stands out to me, and maybe sort of, I know we'll get to sort of emerging themes altogether, but it's sort of stability, community stability, stability in the organization, stability in our finances, stability with housing, stability creating regional cooperation, hearing all those kind of stands out to me, like not doing something big, new, shiny while we don't have stability, or how to prioritize
Build
that.
the stability first. Yeah.
That's what's standing out to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mike.
So you're going to have to convince me on your ice cube floating in the water, because I think the problem is that what we want doesn't exist, and that's because that ice cube goes up and down any day you look at it. And we're talking about what we see today or what we want today, and then the backup to that is, well, that's why you're doing the big picture. Well, the big picture affects the nuts and bolts, but all those dynamics change every day. Something that's not working below the water level will rise to above the water level.
Yeah, all of a sudden you're digging in now.
Right, and then other things that you can accomplish that were big picture things should be below the water level because they should become a normal city operational thing. But that's a point in time snapshot of whatever you're doing, and I think that's the difficulty, is trying to take the idea and make it into something that happens with 7 people with 20 different opinions among those 7 people, and then something happens the next day to change all that. And so that's one of my big frustrations, is that I think you made my comment probably that we are Santa Barbara into something that sounds a little better, I think, because I say that all the time when people say, well, why? And I go, well, because we are Santa Barbara. Okay, but now let's talk about it, but that's why. And that's usually my thing, is that the cities by nature operate like a cargo ship that turns a degree like every half hour, rather than being able to respond like a ski boat and turn on a dime and go in a direction that day, then back the other way. And I don't know that we even want, I don't know which one of those we really want.
Maybe somewhere in between, right?
And maybe.
Maybe you want a tugboat that's adjacent to
right.
that.
But that's the difficulty with this. And so that's always my issue getting out of this, is it's today's snapshot in time, and then how do you apply that going forward when something changes dramatically? You go from a balanced budget with no dip into the reserves to immediately the next year with $5 or $6 million in the hole. And how do you take what you decided a year ago and apply that?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the comment. And what I would say is this is exactly why you do this. Because there is ebbs and flow, and why there is value in having that broader scaffolding, because things are going to shift and change a little bit. But if you know what the big things you're driving toward are, then you have some flexibility within that, and so if you have an opportunity, all of a sudden you've just discovered that there's funding available for X, Y, or Z. Well, maybe that's not something that was on the horizon for the next year. However, it supports this strategic goal. Let's go, right? And so you have flexibility. Kelly, you have.
And I was just going to say, it's also, I think, it's the circling back either quarterly or, at mid-year, where we do an update and sort of check in, like here. And we just sort of talking about kind of how do we create some sort of dashboard so we can track progress on the work that we're doing, and then making sure that this strategic plan will probably line up by the time we're getting done with next year's budget. So then, as part of the budget process, how do we weave funding for priorities into the budget? So I think it's about, the staff rigor to come back and revisit the conversation at multiple points during the year, or something new comes up, and that's when we say, okay, well, that impacts this priority and these other projects, and so that's the value, and so that ability to have the conversation again and again about it.
Well, even to the comment about multiple opinions around a specific topic, if you know that, increasing housing stock is something you want to focus on, and we can decide what that looks like, then that gives you a framework to have that shared conversation. And there are going to be times when it may be a majority, but not everybody is on the same page for the solution. But does it inform and align to that broad priority? Does it align there? And so, as Kelly's mentioning, through the budget, through regular updates, you can do check-ins, but also as you're having conversations at the dais on items that are before you, how does this support what we want to create? So it gives you a framework, and that's why I like that terminology around a strategic plan, is it's a framework that gives you that scaffolding for how you're going to be moving forward. So you don't lose sight of those things, and you don't get waylaid. Things do change. I mean, nobody predicted COVID, right? And so, things can hopefully something like that will not happen again, but things do happen. And so, how do you respond and become nimble in an environment that is fluid? And so, having some of those areas of emphasis helps you to kind of anchor a little bit. So, but first of all, I love Ice Cube. But I think that your point is well taken. It's not like it's not as simple as we have the priorities and we have the other things. They are a little bit more. It's all connected. It's still one big cube.
I have another question, kind of building on that, and yes. I can't help but think of it. I don't want to use specific examples, so I'm trying not to, but it's very hard. Okay, so let's say we have an area of consensus around housing today or even in a couple weeks, we all agree it would be great to fully reform permanent. I know I'm just picking something random. We have 100% agreement on it. And then in 12 weeks, another item comes up where 4 of the 7 of us think we should do something else that does align in the 4 of our view with this big priority, but we've completely shifted staff priorities. Like if both take huge resources, what's the purpose of today if we have the opportunity every 6 to 8 to 12 weeks? And I don't want to take away that choice. I'm not advocating against that, but I'm struggling to see like what is it that, how is anything going to change in terms of consensus building and driving in the right direction if we have these huge priorities that so much could fall under, and in 12 weeks 4 of us could say, you know what, we did all agree on that, but we actually really want to see rent stabilization become a reality in 12 weeks or whatever. I mean, how do we balance that?
Well, I mean, part of it is we went back, we talked about the accountability that can happen through a framework, right? And that's holding council accountable, but also with staff. So if you have, once we've gone through this process, the journey, right, to identify and name what are the things that, what does success look like and how you're going to move those forward, from there, we're talking about implementation. And so having an opportunity to see what that looks like, to reflect on that and commit to that. So this is what we're going to fund, this is what we're going to work on over the next year to get agreement at that point. We're not doing that today because we need to still engage with the community and with the organization to find out, what do we want to, what does that look like? But the degree of what you have decided to fund, what policies you've established, that's where, in getting agreement and sticking to that. And so that then when you come through the next budget cycle, then it's like, okay, well, how are we doing? Are we making progress? Has anything changed? If there are policy pivots that need to happen, then you can have those conversations. And so how you roll this out, how you implement it will need to be a big part of the conversation to make sure that it's not just okay, well, yeah, we've got housing, but it's a catch-all and it's going to pivot every 2 weeks because that would not be productive. But we're not to that point yet. We need to first name the big rocks and get those things there. So. But I mean, self-awareness is the first step, right? To make sure that there's that potential for wanting to move and shift, and the effects that have on staff and the regular ongoing service delivery is important. So, again, team sport. Everybody's on the same team here. So, all right. Well, let's keep going. We can revisit this as we get to the end of our time together too, to make sure that it feels like, okay, we can make some momentum here. And make our way through. All right, so I think we have a short break. So I want you to guys stretch your legs, grab some coffee. When we come back, we're going to start talking about vision, and we'll take you through a beach ball, not beach ball activity. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started again. We're going to start now talking about vision. As soon as I can get off this. Isn't he cute? Sorry, hang on. That's okay. There we go. All right, so vision for Santa Barbara. So again, this is high-level vision statement that is intended to reflect who you are and where you want to go as a community, as an organization. I mentioned that we had opportunity with the department heads to spend some time talking about vision, but we want to also take you through an activity that we did with the department heads that can be instructive around both where you want to go in terms of vision, but also the strategic priorities that we'll come back to after we talk about vision. And so let's start off with a little bit of instruction, and that is you each have some Post-its. This is the only like activity that you might be like, oh, Post-its, but I think you might like this one. So you each should have 3 yellow and you should have 3 blue. You also have a Sharpie that is therefore readable more than a regular pen. So grab the Sharpie, grab the yellow ones to start off with, and what I'm going to ask you to do is, first of all, and we started a little bit on the what do you love about Santa Barbara, but think about what are those things that are true today about Santa Barbara that you want to make sure are sustained. Those things you want to hold on to, so when you're coming out 5 years from now, you can still say, this is part of who we are and what's going on. So those things that are true today, 1 idea per Post-it. And as you have them, these are for the yellow ones. Bring them out to the middle of the tables. I'll grab them and I'm going to hand them over to Janae. She's going to put them up on the board and we'll sort them and see what kind of themes come through. After we do that, we'll come back and use the blue Post-its, which will ask you what are the things that are not true today that when you are 5 years out from now, are you stealing more? Really?
I thought they were for notes.
I mean, technically they are for notes.
Megan is crazy.
Are you going to start folding them up and passing them over, right? Exactly. Yeah, no, none of those. Okay, but focus on the yellow. What is true today that 5 years from now you want to say, yes, it's still true, and we can celebrate that. So one idea per Post-it. As you have them, hand them out. We'll hand them over to Janae to sort and do those. Okay, so I'm going to ask Janae to read off, what do we have for the true today and what are the kind of the themes that jump out?
Not much surprise that some of the themes here match what we've already discussed about what you love and what you treasure and value about Santa Barbara. So there's some connection here about the community, making sure there's an active philanthropic community, that there's responsiveness to an engaged community, strong interconnectedness, a diverse community of different cultures and ages, and maintaining a community focus and investment in Santa Barbara and within one another. Here we've got a lot about the environment, which is something that you all spoke about earlier today. So they're an environmental policy leader, making sure that we take care of the sustainability of the environment, natural beauty and sustainability priorities, and then a beautiful, incredible, desirable natural environment, maintaining that physical beauty of what makes Santa Barbara Santa Barbara. Making sure it's, again, a desirable vacation destination and a highly desirable place to live, so both for residents and for visitors and those coming to your community. Doing that through, an example would be clean, accessible, protected parks and beaches, and making sure those are maintained into the future as well. Here is a little bit more about the built environment, the look and feel of it, making sure that it's world-renowned for its built environment and the architecture that you have here, and a rich historic resource inventory. We've got a couple here more about the organization, maintaining that full-service city. Services, organization, access to the surrounding areas or environment, functioning at a high level. So high-level functioning, full-service organization, something that's important to you to maintain as well. And then here were a couple descriptors. I think these words, and correct me if I'm wrong, whoever put these up, could be used to describe different areas here, maintaining kind of the way that it can be experimental, being progressive, but traditional as well. So sort of maintaining that, and if I'm misinterpreting that and someone wants to elaborate, please let me know. So a lot of alignment in these 4 to 5 areas on what you want to maintain moving forward.
Okay, and all those things that are working well you want to hold on to, take energy and effort, right? So it's important to name them as well. All right, did you get them all clustered there, Susan?
Yeah, what you're hoping is true in 5 years. Not surprising, a lot focused on housing. More affordable housing for middle class, housing justice, stable affordable housing, support workforce housing, more affordable housing, adequate accessible housing, and housing for workers who keep the city running in order to be able to live in the city where they work. Then about the downtown, have an active, successful downtown core. Downtown is the place to be. State Street, a vision complete. Staging planned to make it happen on State Street. Then more city-focused, finances and city budget are solid. Robust financial condition. City is the place to work because the culture and the compensation is good. A nimble, proactive local government. Then over here we have things about the economy, where most youth is employed, socioeconomic equality, close the huge wealth gap, meet general prospects in terms of housing and jobs, for our city and local businesses to be able to recruit and retain staff, better community coexistence, not so siloed, and then most bikeable city and most accessible public spaces.
Okay. All right. What stands out to all of you guys when you talk about the things you want to hold on to and the things you want to make true? Anything? Yeah.
Well, it's hard not to like count count how many, and there are some like the themes. I mean, I'm encouraged that the themes coalesce.
Yeah.
And then the one that I think had the most variability was the economy, all the different ways to get there, all the different priorities that might be under that. But it's encouraging to see that that the groupings are pretty clear.
Yeah, I mean, that's not a lot of different groupings. That's real alignment. As you say, what it looks like in action, that's where the real conversation needs to happen. But there's a lot of alignment on the starting off point. And that was what we heard in the conversations we had as well. And some, definitely some clustering. And we'll write the themes on the True Today in 5 years also, or True in 5 years. Wendy, did you have a comment? No. Oh, okay. Other observations or, yeah.
So kind of on the same thing of where they cluster on the blue ones, it's concerning to me that the one that's least represented up there is the financial related ones, because of course you can have all the goals you want in the world, but if you can't pay for them, that's all they remain to be. And so I think this is like when you're worried about what do you really want to talk about later, and that's the juxt of it, is like if you could just keep writing checks, we could do everything we want to do. And that's kind of reflected, I think, in the cluster of those blue things too, is that the least number of stickers up there actually mention anything having to do with the dollar, while the rest of them are big picture vision items. So just stands out also to me.
No, that's great, and it's that tension between wanting to focus on the sexy, interesting things, right, and the nuts and bolts, right, and you got to focus on both. And so when you're thinking about a 3 to 5 year horizon for a strategic plan, some of these things you may have to year 1, year 2 really focus on. We talked about this at the beginning, kind of the core foundation. That might be financial resources, that might be core service delivery and staffing, how you really have that solid foundation in order to then jump to. So, and Mayor.
Yeah, it goes back to my former comment about, we can probably come together pretty easily on what success would look like. It's the pathways getting there, and then of course it all leads to finance. And I look back at the Venn diagram that you had with the political versus the administrative, and of course on the diagram is all nice and neat and even, which for most of us, those two circles look really different. So, and that thing in the middle is pretty elusive. It can be pretty elusive. So,
yeah, well, it can be squishy, right? Sometimes it shifts a little bit.
But I agree with Mike. I mean, everything we want to do is going to depend on if we can be successful and sustainable financially. So that's pretty clear. So, but the pathways to get there are going to obviously, that's when we're going to see a little divergence in our little sticky notes.
Yeah, and that's fine. Diversions are fine. We have to have those conversations. But what this tells me is that if you're doing a holistic view, that the ingredients from the organizational side are incorporated here along with the things that are externally facing. And that's, the downtown, housing, livability, and quality of life components. And so it's the pieces together that create your strategic plan, your strategic framework, how you implement that and what that looks like over time will be to follow, right? That's where you are working with staff, looking at resources and identifying what's the highest priority first. Not all these things, by the way, if you are the priorities you land on, will get done or happen in the next 12 months. They won't, right? Some of these things have a longer horizon, but some things can move forward and you can make some progress on them. So, okay, any other thoughts or observations on this exercise? Okay. Well, so I mentioned that we did this also with staff, and there were a lot more Post-it notes because there were a lot more people involved. But we tried to summarize some of the themes to them, and not surprising, the focus, which is common for the department heads were more organizationally oriented. And so, again, this is trying to just do kind of high-level major themes that came through. So less externally focused, more organizationally focused. And again, the balance between these things is important. So True Today, the things you want to sustain, there was a whole lot around, lots of different sticky notes around collaboration, collaborative work environment, collaborating with teams, collaborating with community, collaboration. A lot of topics on that. And also the supportive work environment and really feeling like a cohesive, supportive area, a place that people wanted to work. And you have some new people who have joined the team, and so that's encouraging. Dedicated and hardworking staff, the professionalism of the organization, being fact-based, using the professional experience and qualifications was something that is true today that you want to make sure to be able to support and maintain. Providing creative and being solution-oriented, and then being great problem solvers. So being able to respond and adapt in the moment was identified as a strength of today, to hold on to as you look to the future. Things to make happen, to work on into the future, not true today. Having a clear vision, right, that everybody is in agreement, this is what it is. And so, as we've been talking about already today, this was one of the things that came out quite clear, so to speak. Around vision, able to plan farther out and get things done, not beyond kind of the basics, day-to-day transactional work that needs to happen, and that is a culture shift to be able to look and drive that forward. Increasing the use of technology and how work is being done to be more efficient, to maybe free up the ability to get things done. Having a full staff, enough staff to meet expectations, to do the work that is needed. Understanding resource limitations, and so making sure that the community understands those limitations, but also you as a body recognize the limitations of the resources that are available in order to prioritize. That aligns to the vision. That 5 years from now, you'll have longevity in staff, that you won't have everybody new, or a lot of people new, that people will have been here for a while. And that you're less siloed and more standardized in the approach. So again, very organizationally focused, not unusual when we do this activity with department head teams to have that lens. But it's important, I think, for all of you to keep that in mind as well. So any surprises with that? Yeah.
I guess surprised, but stands out that really one of the big reasons we're doing this exercise is for staff and for the organization, so that staff members aren't thrown back and forth, every couple weeks at a time, or different priorities. So to see that laid out as from department head input is really impactful.
Mm-hmm. Good. Yeah. No, I mean, a strategic plan, needs to reflect direction by council, but is really important to staff. And that accountability, and with staff providing back to you, how are we doing, but also for you to hold true to what is ultimately decided, really important. And so hopefully that will be, one of the key takeaways and outcomes from this whole process. Okay, so wanted to take you through that same activity, and I'm not surprised by the conversations that we've had already this morning, that there was a lot of alignment in what came through, but it's nice to see that kind of on the board, and as we're thinking about strategic priorities and next steps, this is important to keep in mind. So vision statement. And so for those who are brass tacks, let's get to the action. This is, again, kind of the broader brushstrokes that maybe is not so fun, but it's really important, and we want to make sure that we are crafting a statement that describes the future you want to create and really reflects who you are as a community. And so you can see in it, this is Santa Barbara, right? And so these are just some purpose of the vision statement. It provides that North Star, but also the priorities that you establish and the work that is done every day really is intended to align to this, to hold this as your beacon, as your North Star, as you're moving things forward. So that's the purpose of a vision statement. Here are a couple samples. So these were derived from the department head workshop and kind of iterations. We had some small group activities. We came up with a bunch and talked about the elements that stood out and what people like. I will read them in just a sec, and I know that the font is probably small from where you're sitting, but a couple things that stood out in the conversation was, first of all, as we heard earlier around the things you love around Santa Barbara, the recognition around the heritage and the culture of the community was something that they wanted to really name and recognize, and that's something you want to hold on to as you're still looking to the future. So it's a little bit of a combination there. So that's that heritage piece, the natural beauty, and the physical environment, very important. Oh, thank you, Janae. Look, it's like magic. Wow, it's small, and now it's not. Perfect. And then also, recognizing the importance of safety, as a part of an organization, the work that you do. And then also having a statement that talks about, what you're trying to achieve. And so that second part on each of them really reflects that. And so maybe I'll ask someone, now that the font is a little bit larger, ask someone to read sample A, and then we'll do sample B. And then I just want to have some conversation around what you like, what you don't like, what resonates, what's missing. And we don't have to land the full plane today, but want to get your thoughts and reactions to this. And if it's like nope, misses the mark entirely, we need to hear that. If it's something that you're like, I can sort of see it, then that's good to hear too. So sample A, who wants to take a crack? Oscar.
Santa Barbara is an iconic, should I have my mic on?
That was a test and you passed.
Santa Barbara is an iconic coastal community that honors its heritage, protects its physical and natural beauty, and ensures public safety. We strive to be a model of resilience, sustainability, innovation, health, and civic pride for generations to come.
Okay, that's sample A. Who wants to do sample B with Mike? Okay, thanks, Megan.
You're welcome. We are a welcoming coastal community that values and protects our natural environment, creates a safe and healthy environment for our residents, and is a welcoming destination for visitors. We honor the past and embrace the future.
So they're similar. You can see just some different words that kind of floated in the room in the conversations with department heads, but really tried to be reflective of the things that kept bubbling up as most important to be able to focus on, and trying to give that future focus while honoring where you have been. And so that was kind of the encapsulation of the process. So comments, reactions. Megan? I'll come back to you.
Sorry. No, go ahead, Wendy, please.
Okay.
Thank you. I was just going to say, I like sample A a little bit more than sample B. Sample B sounds a little bit like ChatGPT. Just a bit. Like it feels a little...
How do you guys feel about that?
Sorry, no offense. No, but it feels like there's, how do I say this? Sample B it's almost like repeating the same thing over and over. And I feel like sample A is incorporating a little bit more about, I keep using the word diversity, but it goes far beyond like racial or cultural. I'm talking more about the diversity in services that we provide, the diversity in priorities that we have, and in things that we maintain. And so personally, I like sample A more because I think it gives a more holistic view of what we as a city are striving for, and with a type of maybe leader that we want to be.
Thank you.
I do agree on the one hand that I appreciate that A seems to incorporate more sort of the breadth of what we do as a city, but I was drawn actually to sample B primarily because to me it reads less about sort of this like magazine of Santa Barbara and more about our care for our people and the idea of welcoming folks into our coastal community and creating a safe and healthy environment for all of our residents. Like that to me, if maybe we want to just combine the two, but what drew me to sample B was this idea that we are not just a vacation destination that you read about that has all of these things. We are a living, breathing, real community that values one another. And I think just some of the language in B leads me in that direction, and that's what resonated with me most.
Felt more personal,
yeah.
It sounds like. Okay. Eric.
I'm kind of fell where Megan is. Sample A to me read more like a mission statement actually than a vision statement, because it's the mission of what you're trying to accomplish, but it doesn't pop. But for me the last line of sample B, I think that's important to everybody in the community because we are so historical. We're one of the most historic cities in the United States, especially in the western United States. So we take that that history seriously. And kind of what Megan said, it just kind of captures more the essence that we're welcoming. I think it's a good tie. We're welcoming and we honor the past. And it says we are a coastal community, and it talks about values. So the only thing I'd add is something about like our beauty matches the landscape beauty matches the beauty of our people and our architecture. If we could get something in terms of beauty all around in there, I think it would.
Not just the physical
Yeah.
environment. Oh, okay, nice. Kristen?
I think maybe for me a combination of the two. I love the words welcoming and the spirit of that. And I like sample A because it's talks about protecting the physical and natural beauty and ensuring public safety. And I get that could be a mission statement too. But being the model of resilience, sustainability, innovation, those all seem like really important things in addition to being welcoming. And so if I were to like tweak sample A a little bit, a little mashup, you know, I might take out iconic and put welcoming. And then I would take out the word heritage because that's a very complicated term, heritage. Especially here, we have Chumash heritage, we have maybe Spanish heritage, we have Latino, Mexico, all kinds of different heritage. So I think it's, I like the past, the honoring the past, or maybe a different word for heritage. And then the rest of that I think is great. And then the honoring the past and embracing the future, I don't know if I'm embracing the future. I might be preparing for the future, or
stabilizing the future.
Stabilizing the future. I don't know. That one sounds I might personally want to temper that a little bit.
Remember, a vision statement should be aspirational, right? And so you wanted something that you're really reaching for. So, prepared. Mayor.
So, yeah, I'm kind of agreeing with the sample B over the sample A, only within the striving to be a model of resilience almost smacks a little bit of symbolism versus actual practice, you know, what we do. And I think B is a little more direct than that. So, the rest, I think it's a little too wordy, a little too flowery for me. And the sample B is more straightforward and actually describes who we are, so.
Okay.
I like sample A. I don't know. I respectfully disagree, Randy. When it says model of resilience, I think we've been through enough natural disasters that other communities have taken note on how we addressed it and recovered from it. So yeah, those are my 2 cents.
One of the things on, and maybe if the department heads are interested to weigh in on this, for the model of those sorts of things, I think part of the conversation was a reflection of being that leader, right? And so modeling these things, but also being a leader in some of these areas. So seeing bold in that. I don't know, Kelly or others, if you want to have any mention of that, if that was thumbs up. And so, that was part of the aspirational component, I think, of that first one, that first part on A. So if we did, some of the things I'm hearing, and actually, Mike, let me hear from you before I. You thought you were going to skate through.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Just going to climb on somebody's back and tag along. I don't like either of them. I think they could be word saladed together.
Okay.
I don't know how the phrase public safety got put into a vision statement. Just seems out of sorts.
Okay.
I don't have a problem with the second part of sample A because it's all about striving. And I think there's nothing there to strive. I can't really define what civic pride is or why that's also in there as something that rises to the top. Sample B, I just laughed because you might as well put welcoming in there for a third time in one sentence.
I knew someone was going to pull that out.
Right? But
some people are welcoming.
But I like the phrase of sample A of physical and natural beauty over the natural environment. Sample B, I like the inclusion of a mention of residents, and not just, and specifically in anything that is part of our vision that mentions all the other components that are part of attracting others to our city, that residents certainly need to be in there and shown and called out as an important part of our vision.
Yeah.
Because by normal means, I think they feel they're not, that we're focused on tourism and revenue generation, and everything that we do is to that. So, so to me, I'd pretty much combine them and then try and figure out how to throw them around in a bucket and pump out one vision that has both of those.
Yeah.
I'll let somebody else do that.
Yeah, you guys don't have, that's okay. Well, we can help with that. Megan?
I'm just thinking about the strive to be a model of all of these things. And I do think I'm now like stuck on it, and I think it's very interesting for a vision statement for our city. Does it matter to me that we are a model amongst other cities, or does it matter that that this works for our city? And for my vision, it's more important to me that we are resilient, sustainable, innovative, healthful, and proud of our city for us as Santa Barbarans than it is that outsiders look at Santa Barbara and say they are a model. I think it will flow naturally if we are resilient and sustainable, that others will look at us and want to be the same. It's not part of my vision, though, that we have that recognition worldwide. I think it's more important to me that we are those things for our residents, and then it will flow from there. So I would just say for me on that piece in particular, like maybe the next step after vision statement is like, yeah, we'll be a model. But what's more important to me is that we are all of those things and that it works for Santa Barbara.
Yeah. Other reactions to that? Yeah, Kristen.
Yeah, it's a finer point on that, and I see that, and I can say for myself personally, it's a motivator or a clarifier for how to make a decision or what the decision might be when the goal is being the model. And we've had decisions like that come up where it was like, well, if San Luis Obispo is doing it or if Goleta's doing it, we're not going to let them get ahead of us, kind of thing. And it's, for me, been an important beacon of how we're doing. Are we falling behind in our goal of being leaders? And so I think just being leaders could be, instead of being a model, but maybe being leaders in, I think actually is, for me anyway, an important decision-making post.
Well, and kind of put those two pieces together, like being a leader in X, Y, or Z for the benefit of residents in the community, right? That's where you bring those pieces together so that you are speaking to those you serve, but also keeping an eye towards best practice and being, at the forefront of what can be. Yeah. So, Eric, your thoughts on this? You provide a little bit of comments, but in reaction to the other pieces, you had mentioned also about getting the people into this space.
Yeah, I think it's all good points. It's kind of a meshing of both of them. For me, I guess it does come back down to we're a city that we define beauty worldwide, but it's not just a natural environment, which the first one kind of focuses on that, but it's the people and the places that we've created. So I was just wording it's so for something like, if we could include something like it's Santa Barbara, the city where beauty is defined through our people and our places, and then you add some of those people, places, and our natural environment, something like that.
Okay. Yeah.
I think going back to the points Megan and Kristen were bringing up about striving to be a model of resilience, if the vision statement is meant to be aspirational, maybe it could just say we are a model of resilience. Or even if it's not a model, we're not the model, right? Or even if it's not written in there, like Megan said, it would naturally follow that others would look at us as leaders if we are doing what's best for our residents. And so maybe it could just be, we are a resilient, sustainable, innovative, healthy, and proud city for generations. I don't know, something like that, right? But really, really taking it putting it in the present tense, like we are this. And the only other thing is, I definitely hear folks where you're mentioning sample B in the comment on residents. That is very, very like a huge gap in sample A. And I think if these were combined, one of the biggest things to take from sample B is the focus on, you know, making the economy in our community sustainable for our residents and not just for the tourist economy. Would be my preference.
So, go ahead.
I just wanted to add one thing. I knew I was getting something. It gets to the word embrace. I saw a different take than Kristen. Is embrace is a powerful word when you're looking at the future, because it sets you up that you're proactively shaping, and it projects an absence of fear. In the future, you might internally have that, but if you're embracing something, you're going into it from a position of strength. Whereas if you're preparing or you're thinking of whatever the other words, you're being more reactionary. So I think embrace for me would be if we went with something like that, it would be a word to consider, because it puts us more in a proactive position of strength for everything else we want to do.
Okay. And some of these we'll do a sample and we'll be able to test this and kind of see what resonates for other people too. So we're really wanting to get your feedback here. Anything in particular? I mean, so what I'm hearing is, you know, first of all, we want to make sure that you see and you hear the community, the residents, as a part of your vision. Get that. Making it bold and present focused. I heard you say also. We like welcoming, like that idea, and maybe not multiple times, but to have the concept of being welcoming. That resonates for you. Is there a question about whether or not public safety needs to be a part of your vision statement? Maybe that's just part of your mission and core service of what you do. I'm looking around to see if there are changes or objections to what I'm hearing here.
I like public safety.
You like it in there. Okay, so some of these things we'll want to test, right, in terms of what matters. But generally, you know, maybe some kind of a combination that touches on these pieces. Are there specific, we talked about embrace and kind of different feelings on that word. Are there other words that you react to the good or to the bad?
Heritage.
Oh, heritage, right. You mentioned that too.
And not the concept of it and the history in the past, but just, I think the word heritage itself is
too complex.
Yeah.
Okay. Other words that pull you one direction or the other? Things to avoid or things to lean in on?
We haven't commented yet, but I think innovation is a nice addition. I mean, I think that is forward thinking and looking at the future and being proactive. So I liked the word innovation in there.
Okay.
I'm a little curious how this fits into what we're doing today, because we're wordsmithing a vision statement, which is okay, but is there a tie-in coming up that I'm not aware of yet? I'm sorry to be a nooge about this, but I'm just going, we're going back and forth on semantics. I'm going.
We're not going to land. All I wanted to do was hear the things that resonate or don't resonate, so that we can then work on that, because this is part of the framing, right? Okay. And so, yeah, and I recognize that, you know, vision statement by committee is probably not the
It's kind of one of those
favorite
beach ball things, you know. So.
No, I get it. And we're not going to spend a lot of time here, but I do want to make sure that I heard from everybody in terms of, you know, those things that you connect to, or those things that, you know, are sort of repellent. And those are the things we want to, or gaps, as were mentioned. Okay. So with that, yes.
Just the last word, sustainability, because I feel like the word sustainability can mean so many things, both on environment, but economic sustainability, and just really keeping that word. For me, it's a very positive word for me. I think would be good to keep.
Okay. All right. Mayor, any closing comments on this section? Nope, he's checked out.
I'm sorry. That wasn't fair. What?
I was just asking if you had any closing comments on this section so we could move on, so that you could.
Yeah, no, like I said, I said what I was going to say. I mean,
yeah.
I was just trying to fit in the kind of global kind of, like, you know, going back to my comment about symbolism earlier and things like this. And this is like, we're not doing a brochure for the visit Santa Barbara. It's like,
right.
So
Yeah. No, I think that's an important comment. Okay. So it sounds like with some help and some fine tuning and some input perhaps from the community or from employees, we're not too far afield with some tweaking. Is that a fair statement? Okay, all right. Okay, so that takes us through vision. And so now oopsie, it takes me, but it should, there we go. Thank you. Strategic priorities. And so, you know, when you're talking about a vision, then you want to have priorities that are going to move you that direction. And that's the reason why we start with that vision. Where do you want to go? Because that helps us as a reminder to strategic priorities and what you want to focus on. And so I'll get this teed up. We do have lunch coming in at 12, so I want to get this started. We'll break and then we'll come back and we'll talk about what success looks like in these areas when we come back. Well, let's try to get through at least the framing of this part. And as we've noted already multiple times, in the big rocks, there seems to be alignment. It's the other part that we want to talk about. All right, so strategic priorities provide direction. And remember, this is really important for the organization. And I want to just underscore that because this is what they can then use as you know, choices and priorities for limited resources. The horizon is 3 to 5 years, and so we want to keep it high level enough so that you can be nimble and flexible within the areas and know that it's not going to all happen in a 2-year budget cycle. And ultimately, these are achieved through the brass tacks, right? Through the specific actions, the strategies that we'll develop. All right, so just as a reminder, I put this back here just because I think it's important, but we've already covered this, and so this is what we're working toward, greater overlap between these two things, and the reminder around the iceberg. Okay, so here's, oopsie, you want to bring us to this slide, Janae? So here's the set of council priorities, and I know you have, for those who have been on council for some time, have gone through various versions of this process many times. In the first part of 2024, you established this set of priorities, and hopefully that seems familiar to you. And so again, we wanted to look back at what you had said was important previously and talk about has anything changed and what does success look like? Again, moving us toward the space of action. So economic vitality is something that seems to still have energy around it, and there are specific elements within that you want to get some action toward. Stability, community stability, and that was another priority, and that can come in the form of housing. It can come in the form of a lot of different things. Emergency preparedness, sustainability, and resilience. This gets into both the infrastructure and the response related to sustainability and the environment, and then a very broad bucket of quality of life, which is captures everything else. And so very broad, right, and very all-encompassing. You can kind of bundle everything, I think, into this. And so in doing so, you lose a little bit of focus. You lose the benefit of saying what's most important, what is beyond the core services of the organization. And so, but we wanted to reflect on those as well. So then, if we look here, this is a jumping off point now for us today. And again, we will move into the discussion around what success looks like, but I want to start off with the big picture around strategic priorities. Can you guys read that? Over on the left are the priorities you set in 2024. And maybe it's worth having some reflection about how those served you or not, I'm not sure. But then considering all of the engagement themes, and then I think relatively validated through here, and we can tweak if we need to, there still seem to be 4 areas of priority, of strategic need for the organization, stimulating economic vitality. And so we've put some action into the nature of the priorities, but again, how that comes into the form of a work plan is where it becomes more of a work plan actionable item. So stimulating economic vitality, and that includes things like State Street, and downtown vibrancy, as well as the waterfront, as well as other areas of need, business attraction and retention. These sorts of things could all potentially fall within that arena. We need to talk about what it looks like and what that actually means in terms of priorities, but stimulate economic vitality. The next one is enhancing community resiliency and safety. So it's a little bit of a refinement from the prior priority you had around preparedness, sustainability, and resilience. But this speaks to, again, a combination of things from ensuring continued public safety and emergency preparedness. So you have those investments in priority, climate adaptation, natural environment preservation, and infrastructure planning. And so infrastructure falls in here too. We know in parts of the city you're looking at flooding concerns, or even investments in aging infrastructure in other areas. And so this would all fall within that area of focus. Next, we have strengthen housing and community services. And so really being intentional about naming housing and also the supportive services that you partner with and you work toward for your community. This would have been part of your community stability priority in the past, but trying to be more clear around the focus on that. So housing affordability, access and preservation, and also the support services that are provided to strengthen and respond to the needs of folks in the community. And the last one, which you did not have before, but came through in the engagement activities we did, was our focus on the organization. So having that as a strategic priority and naming it as such. And so ensuring a thriving organization. And so that means finding the financial resources you need to be able to do all the other things. That means investing time and energy in staff retention and recruitment efforts, streamlining the processes that you do in order to be able to do those other things well, those core services. And so you're really being intentional about naming that area of interest also. And so looking at the True Today, True in 10 years, we had areas around community, and this is kind of community engagement. And so this is some of the methods of how you engage. Again, a lot about the natural environment, which speaks to the community resiliency and safety potentially. The organization, the built environment. So this was look and feel of the built environment. And then things you're working towards: housing, downtown, livability, the organization of financial health, and then economic vitality in the community. So I will stop talking unless there's anything from the department heads that you want to chime in on the kind of some of the work that has brought us to today. And they're like, nope, we're good. Kelly, you want to make any comments?
No, I mean, I think for me, just sort of reaffirming, and for the thriving organization was very important, just to ensure, and I think it encompasses some of the things that the themes that the council was talking about earlier. I think the more important part for us is the next part of the conversation, which is what does the success look like? So anyway, I think the thriving organization can encompass a lot, and not just the employee piece, but also the fiscal stability components that we talked about as well.
Yeah.
I think as long as we add while preserving what we already have, this is like amazing, perfect, home run, better than I could have expected, that it's all synthesized and it feels familiar, like what we have prioritized before. There's nothing new here. It gives more clarity to it and gives us something to coalesce around, and then to, yes, the important part, get to the action items.
Yeah, well, and part of the stuff, the core services you're talking about and maintaining progress, that's all about being a thriving organization also. So it's a little bit embedded into that, but it's also foundational. And some places we'll talk about sort of those foundational priorities that can be organizationally focused. Maybe it's financial sustainability and a healthy, thriving workforce. I don't know. And so those are things that we could certainly consider factoring in as well. But other reactions or thoughts on the big buckets here? And I'm glad that it feels familiar, because that was the whole intent, right? Mayor, did you have a comment?
Not really, but anyway,
Okay.
but I do say that the statement of quality of life is what separates us from all the other superior government organizations. I mean, that's our core purpose in being here is this day-to-day quality of life for all the people who live in the city, our employees and whatnot. So to me, that's kind of the North Star of everything that we do. Underneath is the quality of life. What is it like day to day to live here? And it includes pretty much everything else we've talked about, but I think that's what is different between us and our senators and congressmen and assembly people, is what we're responsible for right here on the ground. So,
which maybe that's something to incorporate into your vision or your mission, right? And just, no, we're not going back. We never back, always forward, always forward.
I was going to say that it also, you could potentially incorporate it into the housing and community services. So it could be something like strengthen housing, community services, and quality of life. So to, if that's, more, it's sort of like that all-encompassing, just capture some
But,
of the,
once again, it's not, what a superior government agency does in terms of grants or financing or whatever they're doing.
all the
It's
other
on
pieces.
us to go out and see people face to face and ensure that they've got a clean and safe city, so.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and part of this, what we'll be working toward is, once we kind of name the areas of focus, is to define them, to put, kind of those directional statements together that can speak to things like, superior quality of life or however we want to name it. So those pieces will come. That's part of the good conversation on that. So, other reactions?
I'll go. I think it's great. It's very well written. These are impossible to disagree with. It's also everything. This is literally everything. Every single thing that could come before us, I could shoehorn into one of these strategic priorities.
Okay.
So if that's the intent, I guess I'm still confused. Then I'm all in, you know what I mean? But I also don't know how anyone could look at this and not be all in. So
How we get there.
yeah, and I think that's the next step, and I think that's the piece that
But I hear you,
Yeah.
but these strategic priority, this is everything there is. So, or can someone name for me a couple of things that are not these, so that I feel like we're choosing something? Does that make sense? I mean, am I crazy?
infrastructure's not on there.
Okay, community resiliency infrastructure, done, right?
Transportation. I mean, there's,
Safety.
there's other. I mean, there's other things. Workforce development. There's things. There's things that you could add. But yes, they're meant to be all, sort of encompassing. But
If that's the intent, then I'm 100% in.
Well, and let me kind of build on that too, because the next step is to say, okay, well, if we're talking about stimulating economic vitality, what are the priorities? What are we going to do? And that's what you're getting to. Like, where are the things I have to choose, right? And so we need the framework first. And I do think that this is reflective of what we have heard in terms of specific things for Santa Barbara. They are big and they're broad, but they're not. They might be similar to other places, but they feel different, and they're going to land different when you start talking about what are the strategies that you're actually going to invest time and resources in. And that's the conversation around, well, what does success look like? If we say stimulate economic vitality, what does that look like here? What are you going to do in order to be able to move in that direction? And that's where choices will have to be made, and that's where you can start to really inform and develop your budget choices, your work plans, and the things that you can see progress on. But you need to start, I think, anyway, it's helpful to start from the scaffolding, which is, point us to a direction and name it in order to work on it. Eric.
I see where you're coming from, and it is, and I agree. The question is which becomes how do you rank them in order of priority? Because or else it gets to what you were saying earlier, Megan, was then any given Tuesday, you could set something up and then shift it. So for me, and I guess I'm hoping it'll be a later discussion, it's the over-encompassing is almost the second to last thing on that, which is budget stabilization. Mm-hmm. Because if we don't have an understanding of the budget and we don't recognize the revenues in, revenues out, and which items are beyond our means, then if we prioritize wrong, we would put too many resources in one of those at the expense of the others. So somehow budget has to be the over-encompassing of it all, because every single one of those is going to cost something, and it's in relation to the others. And so I guess it's always a question, how are we going to pay for all this?
It is, and it's also a question of how and when are we going to prioritize within this. So if you're developing a plan that has a 5-year horizon, let's just say, right? Again, you're not going to do all of these things in year one. You're going to have to make choices, and maybe you start with, we're going to focus on stabilizing the budget. I mean, maybe that's collectively, just giving it as an example. But maybe that's, you name those things that, over the next 2-year cycle, this is where we're going to spend our time and energy. We don't want to lose sight of those other things that are important. And when you have opportunities that arise, or you can make some progress in those areas, then you're still making movement. You're moving forward in those areas, but you're saying annually, what are the top priorities within our plan? So not like, let's start again and do a plan, but within this strategic plan framework, what are the things that you're going to really be intentional about making progress on? And so that's how you make progress, but you don't lose sight of the big rocks, the things that you want to move forward on. And again, you don't lose the ability to be nimble within that. So I hope that helps a little bit. Yeah.
I just want to check. So I'm thinking of this as like, this is everything that the city does, everything. And that this isn't really like a list of priority one downtown, but this is like a circle of 4 equal priorities, and that as we're prioritizing within each one what to do, to kind of be checking in that not one is kind of going out of kilter with the others, that these are equally important priorities. Is that sort of the idea, or?
Within the context of the plan, sure.
Yeah, okay.
Within what you're doing annually, maybe not.
Okay.
Right? So you may decide that, this next 2-year cycle, our priority, we have our biggest priority is our budget stabilization and doing something on State Street. Those are the things that are highest. I'm just, speaking out of turn here. And so in that case, then you're doing annual priorities within your priorities. And so, right? So this is the framework. We'll identify then the strategies, and then we're going to do that through our discussion, after we've had lunch, as well as engagement activities. We'll come back and affirm what those look like, and then that's your framework to say, okay, what's going to happen in the near term, what's going to happen longer term, how are we going to prioritize within those elements. Okay. How are we feeling? Mike?
Great. I'm going to go home today and Dana's going to go, what did you give Megan? Because you don't have to say a word. You can just follow Megan.
All right. Alignment. We'll call that alignment. How about that?
There you go.
There we go.
I would say just hesitancy. I think that's a little bit like where does this lead to? And I think that's the concern. And I get that because I think
there's been conversations previously where you felt like what are we doing with this? How does this really help us as an organization? So I appreciate the concerns, and I think it's something that we all need to be cognizant of as we're moving through the next steps.
Yeah, frustration and skepticism. Those are the 2 things that I feel, and that's fine. That's the reality baseline of where you have been through these processes, and so let's move the needle. Let's change the narrative on what this means. So, okay. So I'm hearing that this framework, these high-level buckets, if you will, address the things that are important for the community. Okay.
With the exception of quality of life.
Right. Well, quality of life, yeah, maybe kind of embedded into some of these pieces too. It's kind of like the foundational piece, right? It's the why we're here piece is what I heard. Okay. All right. Well, then let's do this. I think I saw boxes coming in, and I want to just confirm. I think lunch has arrived, and so we can break for lunch. And then we'll come back, and then we're going to look at each of these, and we're going to talk about, well, from your individual and therefore collective perspective, what does success look like? Let's get to the brass tacks of what are the things that are important, and that's what we'll spend out the balance of our time together, and then we'll wrap up with kind of next steps and making sure that we're all comfortable with where we are and where we're going from here. Sound good?
What time do you want to reconvene?
I think if we can convene back at 12:30, that should be enough time if you're going to get some fresh air. Do what you need to do, but 12:30 we will begin again. Okay. So first of all, if you have any thoughts or comments kind of over lunch that you wanted to share, we'll want to invite those. But hey, guys in the back, thanks. That was a universal guys in the back, not pointing direct fingers at anybody in particular. But we'll start off with a little bit of a sharing about those things the thing that is most important to you. I want to get that in the room before we start doing our main activity, which is you see the 4 areas of focus that we've talked about already, kind of high level, and we'll put it on the slide as well with the areas that sort of represents from the engagement themes. But what we want to use this time for is to start identifying and talking about what does success look like, right? And so this is hopefully the meaty part of the conversation you've been waiting for, but it's really important for us to capture the ideas around what does success look like for each of these 4 areas in the next 3 to 5 years. And so that's sort of the horizon that we're looking at. What is practical, what is doable, what is going to be important for the community and for the organization. So we'll spend some time naming those things. We'll put them up on the wall, and then we'll have some conversation around them. We don't have to prioritize today. We don't have to land the plane, but I want to get all of the ideas synthesized and understand where there is agreement, where there is differences of opinion. Because remember, importantly, what we're going to do after this workshop today, this being step 1, is to engage, right? To engage with employees, to engage with the community, to be able to start to test some of the areas of success, what's missing, what resonates, those sorts of things. So that's our work for this afternoon. We'll then bring it up, we'll synthesize it, bring it back, summarize at the end of our time together, bring it back to you then as a summary report that serves as our launching point for the next steps in the process. And I would be remiss if I wasn't to just say, bless you, that too. To say, I know that you've gone through this before lot of times, priority setting, and what makes this different. And you won't know until you're to the other end of this, right? Until you have walked the path, gone through the journey, and actually seen things happen. And I know that, I get that. I just want to say that out loud. And my ask here is just trust the process. Trust the leadership, trust your teammates on council to be able to move these things forward. And so, okay, with all that, I'll step back down off my soapbox for just a moment. And I'm gonna, oopsie, she already put it there for me. Ask you to share as a getting back on focus, on point. One thing, if you had a magic wand, or the ask of, you've got, we'll say 3 years to make something happen. What's that one thing? And I wanted you to be able to share that, to get it into the room. Again, we're not doing priorities, but just to know what people care about. This is helpful to Kelly also to know what's on your mind, where you're focused, because staff wants to help you guys be successful just as you want to bring success to the community. And so that's why we want to start there, and then we'll talk more about strategies. So your one thing, I'll ask for whomever is ready to share. Your one thing.
One thing, if possible, would be to make parking free in Santa Barbara.
Okay, all right. Free parking in Santa Barbara.
Yes.
All right. So we're starting aspirational.
I figured shoot for the stars and we'll fall somewhere.
There's a saying that goes along those lines too, probably a song too. So, yeah. Okay, so you want people to be able to park and use the businesses and the amenities and just get around.
Right, just like all the neighboring cities.
Okay, all right.
A question, is this beyond what's already happening, or we're picking one policy, or which one of these categories?
What is the thing that you're like, I wish we could just do fill in the blank? What's your one thing that you really...
And not saying that it would replace all the other things that we're doing.
We're not doing opportunity cost here.
Okay.
We're going to come back and we're going to talk about the strategies and the plan. I just wanted to kind of get into the room. I'm sure that you each have a thing that you're like, I just really want this to happen, or something that runs deep, and it can be specific or it can be broad. I'm just curious.
Rent stabilization.
Okay. You want to go, Mayor?
So you're talking about nothing quite so broad, but one specific thing?
One thing. What's one thing?
Like economic vitality wouldn't be it. It would be something more specific than that.
Yeah.
Well, I would just like to see State Street come to fruition, be complete, be open, be ready to go, and tomorrow. That's not a tightly held secret, by the way.
No, I don't think it probably is. Does the day after tomorrow work? Okay, so State Street, get it activated, get it going. That's your one thing. Okay, that's great. Mike, how about you?
I don't know if I'm that specific. I'd just like to see financial stability
Yeah.
for the city.
No, that is specific.
Perfect
That's-
world would be financial certainty. Yeah, good luck with that. But
Right.
and then if you wanted something more specific, I would say like agreement on what financial stability is for the city.
Yeah.
Because I see that definition toyed with all the time when you're going through exercises like this.
For sure. I mean, there are different definitions and paths both to get there. But to be stable financially, you don't have to worry about the money, basically. That's what.
Have a plan.
Or have a plan. Okay.
Have a plan that resolves the worries.
Right. Yeah, good. How about you, Wendy?
My one thing I think could help define economic stability, my one thing would be for every city worker and local business, both owner and employee, to be able to afford to live in Santa Barbara. And that takes many forms. I'll echo and second what Councilmember Sneddon said, rent stabilization, but we also need to facilitate the building of housing and a million other things that I'll get to later.
One thing, and also I think that was going to be in 3 to 5 years.
Yes.
Okay. All right, Eric.
Mine's the same as Mike's. It's a financial plan that sets the future councils up for success so they're not constantly having the same battles we are, and ultimately Oscar can get his free parking.
Ooh, I like the symbiotic. There we go. We're working together already, guys. That's good. That's good. Okay. Thank you for that. So here are the strategic priorities that we talked about before we broke for lunch. They're on the wall here also. So I'm going to leave this on the screen because it includes, and I'm going to walk through them really quickly just as a touch point, because there were reasons that these were framed, because there were themes that emerged through the engagement activities, and that's what is sort of bulleted below for reference underneath each of these areas. And so under stimulate economic vitality, we have the topics of State Street, right, downtown vibrancy, and that State Street, but it's also kind of downtown adjacent. That was a theme. The waterfront, the work that's happening there, business attraction and support, and the airport. And so all of those drivers to economic vitality. And so those were some of the themes that came through. For enhanced community resiliency and safety, that included the themes around public safety, making sure to continue. And there was a lot of pride in public safety, but to make sure that there's the adequate resources and support to do the core, right? To make sure that you're doing the basics. So public safety, emergency preparedness, climate adaptation, natural environment preservation, and infrastructure planning. And there's some resources that are intended to focus on that too. So those were the themes that led us to that area of focus for the priority. The next one, strengthen housing and community services. Hey, you're good. This is, concise because it's really about housing affordability, access and preservation, and social support services. And so those were the areas, the themes that drove to that one. The last one, thriving organization, kind of employee satisfaction and retention, budget stabilization, and organizational efficiency were the major themes that came there. Not intended to be prescriptive or the answer, but I wanted to remind us of the themes that we had heard through engagement activities that led us to those areas of focus. And Megan, while you were, we asked each of to get us started I'm going to put you on the spot here because I know you're just coming in midstream. But if you were to, in 3 to 5 years, if you had to pick one thing that was like, just make this happen, like what is your focus? What would be your one thing?
Of those?
Just whatever, anything.
Do you want to hear what other people think? Yeah, that'd be great. Sorry, my son
No.
is very sick, so I'm kind of.
Oh, gosh.
This is like not a great.
I'm sorry.
How much we put on the spot? Can I hear other people?
Yeah, we didn't realize that. I apologize.
Okay. So, yeah. Amazing.
Good job.
I wrote it down. Would you like me to read what other people? Okay, so we had Councilmember Gutierrez said make parking free. The mayor said State Street comes to fruition. It's open, it's vibrant. Councilmember Steddon said rent stabilization. Councilmember Jordan and Friedman sort of said the same thing, which is financial stability, certainty, a financial plan that sets the future city up for success, an agreement on what that is. And then Councilmember Santamaria said every worker and business owner is able to afford to live in Santa Barbara.
So many good ones. Yeah, I guess mine would be housing stability. That's like a suite of things.
That's fine. Yeah, I just wanted, my whole point was to just try to get that in the room and to kind of share. We're going to go through an activity now that for each of these 4 areas, kind of with the themes in mind, ask the question, what does success look like? You know, again, same kind of horizon, 3 to 5 years or so. What does success look like to you? And so trying to put some words to that, to define what are the things that we're going to do or that you would like to have the city do in order to stimulate economic vitality, in order to enhance community resiliency and safety, in order to strengthen housing and community services, in order to ensure a thriving organization. And so what are the things that would be important? Keeping in mind, we're going to take these ideas and these themes, synthesize them, and then we're going to bring them to engagement activities to kind of test them and see what other things, you know, there are things more important, what rises to the top. We'll bring that back. That's going to be really instructive to how do you prioritize within your plan for these areas. And so we want to make it real and practical, 3 to 5 years, or not a 10-year, not a 20-year plan, but you know, near term, what do we want to focus on? Okay, made that make sense? No?
So
yeah. Okay.
I heard you say 2 different things. So
okay.
There's a question up there that says, what does success look like?
Yes.
And then you said in there somewhere like, what do you want the city to do? Those are 2 different things.
Okay.
Right?
Technically.
Well, I want more housing available in 3 to 5 years. But that doesn't say what you want me to do. So which do you envision going up on those sheets?
I want to start with what does success look like?
Okay.
Some of that might be that we've completed X, Y, or Z. And so there's a little bit of gray in there. So feel free to use it or not. But really, I want to get to this idea of how are we going to define success, and then we can work toward that. Good clarifying question. Thank you.
I would say just off the top of my head, a surplus and
I would say that a surplus in tax revenue as opposed to a deficit.
Okay, so you're talking holistically around what does success look like for this. I'm gonna take us a step further, and I'm gonna have you think about each of these different areas. And so we have brought back our friends, the Post-its. And so what I would like to invite each of you to do, same idea, and this is not, not complicated, but I want to make sure you can individually express those things that matter to you. And you can do, if you have just one success indicator for a thriving organization, that's fine. One Post-it's fine. If you've got, 5 for stimulate the activity or the economic vitality, write them down. Let's get them in there. I'm hoping you don't have 20. We want to make sure that they're focused in areas of what does success look like? What do you want to have happen? And then we will sort those up on there and kind of see what themes start to emerge. And then we'll have some conversation about what that looks like.
Do we say which one it fits under, or do you kind of just find out?
So I want you to write them down and then go stick them up on the boards. Yeah. Okay, clearly I'm going to have to put some borders on this. For Wendy, we're going to say, no. I would say, let's, to be intentional about this, let's do no more than 3 per area.
Oh, we can do more than one area. That was my question.
Yeah.
We can go for more than one. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. I want to talk.
I don't like that just one important thing.
No, that's what, right. So you can, what does success look like? So if I'm Kristen and I'm like, okay, I know I have got 2 things that are really important to what success looks like for me here. 1, 2. Okay, for this one, oh gosh, I have a ton. I'm going to do 3 here. This one, I'm just pretending. Nah, I made 1, right? And here, maybe it's fewer. And so just keep it to no more than 3 per area, but talk about what does success look like? What do you want to make happen? For each of us. In 3 to 5 years. Okay, I'm gonna start reading off on some of these. I'm gonna start off on the stimulate economic vitality, and we'll talk about some of the groupings and some things we may move around, but mostly I want to get them into the room. So we'll go through that, and then I want to have a conversation around what success looks like and some of the things that you have put there, so we can have some dialogue about what stands out. And we'll do similar for each of these while they're still sorting down there. So for stimulating economic vitality, again, keeping in mind, including the downtown, business attraction and retention, the waterfront and airport were some of the themes that came through there. So what do we have here? So we have a few that relate to State Street. So attract more late night restaurants to State Street master plan complete and adoption with action plan, permanent financially achievable plan for State Street. So these are all specific to that. Also, we have housing downtown, so sort of adjacent but different from this, I believe. Over here, so success looks like no more vacancies. So vacancy rates in single digits, 0 vacancy rates, turning away businesses. Actually, this one says or less on State Street, so maybe we'll kind of put that between here. So this is more about State Street. This one is more broad, or this is how it's written. Success looks like we have a commercial vacancy tax, and so maybe this comes over here closer to the vacancies as a way to do that. Increasing tax revenues because we've been able to stimulate business. Diverse economies, not just tourism, so you can see evidence of a diverse economy here. Nothing to see here. Here we have a cluster of Post-its related to success, meaning a simplified permitting process and related to processes, so complements on our process, city processes and for development, reducing regulatory burdens, and so making it more simple to get things done. Having a hotel district and town halls regularly. I think I read that right. Did I read that right?
It's not in the wrong category.
Dang it.
Community services.
Community services.
Where do you need that? I think these go over by you. Perhaps.
No, I think maintain reserve policy is as a budget.
Okay.
And that's a budget also. Yeah. Okay, so continuing along, free and validated parking citywide.
Yes.
And then success here looks like, this is more about, these haven't been organized. So this is about develop immediate flexible plan policy for State Street. So this comes up here again with State Street. Lots of energy there. Prioritize economic strategies. We also have economic stability priorities. So those two I think are all encompassing here. And then focus on private sector business success. Take our boot off the neck of business. I almost said Guinness. It looked like Guinness, but it's not Guinness, it's business. Maybe we need Guinness. Do we need Guinness? I don't know. Okay, so that's a little bit about again the process, the ability to streamline and get businesses going. So those were all of the themes that actually emerged for what success looks like related to economic vitality. So again, activating State Street, getting that going, a lot there. Improving how you're supporting businesses, getting them through the processes, simplifying that, reducing the burdens there. And then some goals around what that looks like. So you're able to then activate free parking so people can access things, and we have increased tax revenue, and the vacancy rates are low. So all of these things again work together, but it provides good focus if you're thinking about economic vitality and what that looks like here. Thoughts on this one?
Still kind of a mixture of not what does it look like, but what do you want to do to get it to look like something?
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, I think it's part of it is going to be that, and I think that's okay. But it gives us some areas to kind of start to tease out that we can start to run past an engagement. Like, do we agree? What's the highest priority? And getting some of that input. We'll worry about the wording and what this looks like down the road. Other reactions
Are
or?
we driving towards that? Are we going to drive towards what we think success will look like? What it'll look like when we get there? Because these are like what Mike was saying. This is how do we get there?
No.
So what does it look like when we get there? Are we gonna do that at some point, or was that sort of part of this?
This, we're going to get there, yes. This is the, to trust the process.
These are like action steps.
Let's not worry about the words. This is, what we have here is, we have directional focus within the area of what that looks like. What do we want to see happen? Whether it's an action item or it's the end result success statement, you know, one ties to the other.
And it sounds like it's both, because the question was, what does success look like?
Yeah.
Right? So it could be specific actions, it could be the end result. It could be both.
And sometimes a specific action, once completed, is the result. So that's why it gets a little bit muddy. What's it?
Well, because these are commands. These are stimulate, enhance, strengthen, ensure.
That's right.
And so what it would look like, what's it going to look like when we get there?
Mm-hmm.
And that isn't kind of what the question I thought was being asked.
Yeah.
That's something that looks like, that's how we get there, right?
You're talking.
Enhance or to stimulate. I mean, there's a goal. It's great to do that.
Uh-huh.
But what is it?
So you want this as a vision, you want this to be stated as a vision statement, a vision, a goal.
When we reach success,
Uh-huh.
what will that look like? I think that's kind of what
Like you have X amount of surplus at the end of each year. That would be
right.
success.
So I didn't know. I think Mike was going to get to the same point. It was like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, so we have been steering this toward the conversation of what are we going to do in order to stimulate economic vitality. And so the question, and this, you know, at the end of the day, this is your plan. And so if it's better to have it as a statement of the future state, right, that you're trying to create, and then talk about the priorities. That's, you know, there are different models for this. You know, I heard, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And so this was a little bit of let's define what does success look like, and this leads us towards some conversation around what are we going to fund? What are we going to prioritize? What are we going to get accomplished?
I mean, at some point in time, we'd like to say real success downtown would look like we have the highest rents of any place in town because it's so successful, it's in high demand.
Yeah.
Then it goes through.
And I think there's there's the projects, and then there's probably performance metrics that go along with it. So I think as we start to hear what your kind of goals are, staff will then kind of build that out and say, okay, this is what we thought we heard, you know, State Street revitalization, and then here's some performance metrics that we're going to look, like it's sales tax data, it's vacancy rates, it's these things.
At some point you want full occupancy, you'd like,
That helps. Sorry, I wasn't following the thread, but that means part of this will be, you know, how do you quantify success, which is not a statement, but it is a metric that informs what does that look like. So if you're talking about vacancy rates, right? You want to see the trend going in the direction of lower. And so you can track that over time and you can see if you are moving in the right direction. And maybe it's in part because you have streamlined your business processes. Maybe it's in part because you have a new plan in place for, I mean, these pieces fit together, right? They fit together. But here, thank you, Kelly, that's helpful. You know, including key performance indicators of how you're doing and what success looks like will be a part of a final strategic plan. This is the meat in the middle of how you're going to get there.
I get what you're saying. I get to the pot of gold at the end.
Literally. Okay. All right. Well, I will ask again. Trust the process. We'll make there. But what's important to you, each of you, in this process is different and helpful to hear. So I appreciate that. Okay. So in terms of what success looks like and what you might be interested in focusing on, any other thoughts or comments related to strengthening economic vitality? Okay. Yes, Megan.
Sorry, maybe we mentioned this, but like a priority for me is a diversified economy.
Yep.
I don't know how that fits into there or whether that's something that came up. So we're only going to talk about the ones that there's consensus on? Is that
microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry. Should we just be talking about the ones that there's like more than one bullet on?
No, I thought I read that one off too.
Maybe you did.
Yeah. So what we want to do here today is we're trying to capture the elements for all of you of what what you're trying to accomplish. I'll use different words. What you're trying to accomplish, what you're trying to create. A diverse economy is one of the post-its, they put it up there, that's here. And so we'll be able to frame this out and engage on these topics. And so yes, and? Yeah. I think I read it, but if I didn't, I apologize for that one. Okay. All right. I feel like, does this feel too muddy? Do you feel like you're unclear about what we're trying to accomplish here?
I'm trusting the process.
Amen, sister. Thank you. Others, are you feeling like we're okay? Okay, just checking. Just want to make sure. All right. So looks like there's still some clustering that has to happen, or maybe these are all scattered. So enhance community resiliency and safety. What do we have? We have increased community. So some of these will be tactical, and some of these may be outcomes. And so let's just see what we have here. Increased community safety trainings, so you have more people who are trained. Let's see, sustainability department, let it innovate. So this is a kind of a cultural element of letting things happen. We had some of that actually over in the Thriving Organization as well. Innovate and create partnerships with the county and other entities, or agencies rather. So leaning into the partnerships, again, kind of that's a little bit of how. More open space protected and preserved. Fire resilience and climate resilience. Update the policies to incentivize. And so here we have a twofer. We've got the statement of, we have fire resilience, but we have also updated our policies. That's the how we're going to get there. Investing in our fire department and enhancing our wildfire resiliency. So this is again about fire resiliency here. So more employees are living here. So part of this was in an emergency or when there are concerns, if people are unable to live locally, that's a big problem. And so that's what this, I think, reflects. Increased wildfire preparations. These are hood groups, neighborhood groups, and assessment districts, so to help fund those things. Fully staffed and equipped in public safety, 0 empty first responder positions, and so this kind of goes with the fully staffed, and then making sure that they're also able to live here. Infrastructure, prioritize climate adaptation, 0 emissions, storm capture, etc. So this is the infrastructure focus, so getting away from the emergency and wildfire piece. More resilience hubs set up in where people know where they are, so this probably can come with the training a little bit. Maintain creek beds and drainage. So this is part of the infrastructure also. And target Measure C funds for infrastructure. So these are all specific to infrastructure needs. So we've got some infrastructure. We have training and wildfire resilience. We have the capacity and staffing to manage response. And then we're also protecting some open space as a part of that too. Comments? Okay. All right. So, you want to do this one?
Sure. So strengthen housing and community services. Some of this is focused on processing, make permitting faster and cheaper, improve planning process to reduce housing costs, compliments regarding city processes for new housing. Then we go to 3 for rent stabilization. Form neighborhood organizations in each district, have regional cooperation with the county, school district, city, college, etc. on housing. This is bigger kind of policy issues. The beginning of the end of surface city lots, transfer that to housing. Meet the RHNA goals on low income and very low income housing. I'm not sure about this one. Way above number historical housing development. I don't know.
More development.
I'm sorry?
More development compared to the past.
Okay, more development.
Not historical as in terms of old.
Yeah, I was like going to historical. Okay, more development as opposed to the past. Rezoning, again, to increase housing stock. And then create a short-term rental ordinance in the coastal zone. Whole district town meetings. What's that?
Regularly.
Regularly, okay, thank you. TOT and vacancy tax for
Local Housing Trust Fund.
Local Housing Trust Fund, $5 million a year allocated to the Local Housing Trust Fund. Maintain the Local Housing Trust Fund, don't duplicate, capitalize on matching state funds to build affordable housing. And again, with the Local Housing Tax Fund, regular source funding for that.
Okay.
Did we cover everything? Okay.
Okay, so yeah, so for this one, there's a lot of, more, this one touches policy more than some of these others are more administrative in the nature, and that's not surprising, given kind of the focus that is there. Okay. You want to do the next one, Susan?
Okay, remember this is ensure a thriving organization. So balance the multi-year budget, including self-insurance fund. The budget is stabilized. Please 1 year at least without projected deficit.
I like that there's please in there. That's nice.
That is a mutual accomplished goal. I will just say that.
Yeah.
Maintain reserve policy, ability to do multi-year budgeting. So that's all in the same grouping there. Departments have the ability to think creatively and bring ideas forward. Have a clear vision that all employees understand and see themselves participate, I assume participating in. Have better morale and trust. Break down department silos where possible. Over here, higher pay, market leadership, implement class and comp study and ensure all city workers are paid a living wage. City staff salaries and compensation are competitive, above market. What is this using? Maybe that's it. High employee retention numbers, competitive employee compensation, minimal turnover, and then is this council's opinion? Employees' opinions offered willingly and without reservation, and compliments from public, from organized efforts, and more public engagement opportunities. Anything missing? That would be incredible success.
That's busy 3 to 5 years, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So thoughts or comments, first of all, on kind of the zoom out wish list of everything that we would want to do. What is, first of all, kind of reactions on that? Eric?
There's no way to pay for all that.
Okay. Wendy?
I agree, there's no way to pay for all of it, but I think there are some tangible solutions we can take that could advance multiple priorities forward in one. And so, for instance, if we're talking about employee retention, right? If we're talking about retention and recruitment, that goes into paying them a living wage, but that also goes into us investing in affordable housing because they need a place to live. And so I think some of these policies can help drive multiple of these things forward. We just have to be willing to think creatively and not get scared by the daunting list, because yeah, it's true that we can't pay for all of it, but I think there are some things that if we prioritize, it'll help check off multiple things off the list.
Kristen?
Again, I'm actually really encouraged because a lot of these are already underway, in process, and this is just putting a measurable to it in the 3 to 5 years, so an accountability for things that we've already prioritized. Some of these things we already have in the budget, or we already have in our housing element, or already underway. So I think we can pay for all of it, and I actually think it doesn't need to be either or for one of these. The list of what everybody's number one was, I thought, oh wow, we could actually do all of everybody's number one and be done, sort of thing. Like, I don't think it's one or the other. And I think a lot of these are already underway.
Okay. Other comments? Yeah, Mayor.
So once again, I still kind of struggle the way it's couched because I still see pathways and action steps versus actual what does the end result look like. So if I had to name each one of those, like stimulating economic vitality, for example, would be completely occupied commercial spaces functioning at maximum to produce the amount of tax revenue and whatnot we need, along with property taxes, along with the things in the TOT hotels full. That would be the goal, and that would what success would look like. You know, community resiliency and safety would be completely equipped and staffed public safety departments, and of course with all those of resiliency to make sure that our drainage work during storms and all the things that we need to go forward, the things that would look like once we get there. Okay. Housing and community services is going to be tougher because that's going to be a heavy lift. You know, what we can do is try to continue to do the best we can. You want to have what we really have a hard time pursuing, which is workforce housing. And those are the kind of things that once we got to the point where we could actually house reasonably the amount of people that want to live here, but not everybody who works here wants to live in an apartment. A lot of people want to have a house, so you're going to have people that are still going to be commuted in no matter what we do. But that would be more of a success, and a thriving organization would be complete vertical communication between all departments, so that there was no siloing, there was no bureaucracy, there was no talk to the hand, which is more of a matter of structure than our personnel really are good, and they really do try to do that. But sometimes our system gets in the way, and I think we're in the process right now of kind of breaking open some of those boxes and getting there. But once we do get there, there would be that kind of complete communication, like Mike was saying, also having employees be able to feel unintimidated whenever they wanted to speak out about something they saw or something they'd like to see. And I don't think that exists institutionally, but it is something that not everybody's aware of. So to me, those are what we would eventually look like once we got done. And we'd have a surplus every year that we could feed into our pension fund and into our local housing, affordable housing trust fund. So that's what that would look like.
Yeah, well, and I think that it's a combination of articulating that end goal, and maybe that's in the form of performance metrics, maybe that's as a goal statement that defines each of these, and then from there you have an array of activities, steps, strategies, whatever you want to name them, that you're working on to move there. You know, some of these things you can prioritize and make movement on in the near term, while other things might have to, sit on pause while you're working through these things. And so, can you do all of these things? You can definitely move in the direction. Can you do them all in the next year, 2 years? Maybe movement, maybe not all of it, right? But in terms of a strategic plan and laying out that roadmap, that gives you a course that you are charting and you're working toward over time. Yeah, Megan, you have a comment.
So I think what's great about this is clearly we do have a lot of overlap, but what I'm seeing in front of me up here is all of the things that we're currently trying to do. This doesn't change or narrow anything about my vision, the priorities that I see us trying to figure out to put in place week after week, which is probably on the one hand a good thing,
right?
But on the other hand, what is really the purpose? If the purpose is to try to get us to understand that there has to be some better balance between our priorities and our resources, where does this fit in? Because I love seeing what I'm already focused on up on the board, but it doesn't narrow my thinking in any way. And maybe it isn't supposed to narrow my thinking, but then why?
Well, first of all, I would say the fact that it reflects what you're working on in the direction you've been collectively moving, that's a good thing, right? If all of us...
doing too much and we need to.
Right. Well, so what I would say is from here, though, is the opportunity to put it into action, right? So translating it from the things you're working on, and this department's working on this department's working on that, and there's policy topics that come through. You have a budget, so a disjointed effort into a more systematic plan. And so from here, to be able to build it into a work plan that says, these are the things we're going to get done this year. These are the things that are going to wait till next year. That's the balance part. And so that's where where staff can say, hey, we know these are the things you want to do. Here's what we can feasibly accomplish in the next 12 months, in the next 18 months, next 24 months. And some of these other things may have to wait. Please be patient. But if you don't have them in a plan and you know that they're of importance to you, they're going to keep sneaking in and disrupt the other movement that you would be making.
Would this be an appropriate time for council to weigh in on what we would want staff to prioritize?
Well, so I think that we can talk about what's most, that's why I wanted to start with your one thing, and I was going to do kind of what most excites you. But what I would say for a pause is to let an engagement process happen so that you can come back informed by that on these priorities. And then yes, absolutely, I mean, council will have to weigh in on the things that are most important, informed by input on resources and capacity from staff. So not yet, I guess is how I would answer that question. Kelly, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, but I would just say, for example, like State Street revitalization.
Yeah.
But that looks different. Like, what are the action steps in the next 1 to 3 years leading us towards that? So I think now the task is we take State Street revitalization and we say, okay, finish, adopt State Street master plan, target date. Develop, permit streamlining process for new businesses on State Street, or whatever that looks like. And then coming back and sort of gut checking that with council is like, are these the things that you really want us to be focusing on as it relates to State Street revitalization? But this is helpful because you're not saying like, we're really worried about the Milpas Street business corridor. No, you want staff to focus on State Street. So that's really where we're going to focus our attention. And then, I think in that shifts over time. And so I think it's a lot of this is confirmation of what we are, but now it's drilling down that kind of next level.
Understanding that that's what this is doing is that's a different question about which priority over other priorities. And now I want to go back and put different things on there because that's sort of the understanding that whatever we're already doing in process, they're supposed to.
Like 15 or 10 more minutes to like put a couple more listings up.
So we can give a couple more minutes. Yeah, we can do that because we want to make sure that it's not disingenuous where we're saying these are the things. It's like, but actually, right?
Yeah.
And so, and I think it's important, those things that are big lifts, that even if you're working on them, I mean, some of these other things are probably already underway, but it's important to get them in your plan because then we're saying these are the things that we are focused on and we're going to spend our energy pursuing, right? And if it's not there, Eric, yeah.
The reason I was short with my initial one is I wanted to see all your reactions to the budget issue because it keeps coming down to that. I think we should actually, rather than taking another 10 to 15 minutes to add things, we should be taking the next 10, 15 minutes to take some of those things off. Because or else I feel like we're going to end up at the end of the day right back where we started. And it's not going to provide clarity. And my concern, because it's happened in the past over my nearly 8 years here, we've done similar things with different strategies through these. And within a couple weeks, we go into budget or we come into something else comes in and it just blows up everything we've done. And there are some big things out there that are being looked at, and they don't have the budget for it. And every time it comes up later on, there's never a reduction in something else. So my thing would be like, which one of these would be the say even 3 priorities? And if that's the priorities, what are the resources it's going to take, and what do you want to say this is going to have to hold? So I don't know if adding more things is going to be helpful. I think it'd actually be detrimental to today's discussion because we're going to run out of time, and we're going to have even more things than we have now, which is too many choices. And the last thing I'll say is when you give a council too many choices, you open up a whole can of worms.
And I would just have a counterpoint to that, because I think the next step is the engagement process. And so, you know, I think it's going to be interesting. I don't know that the council is ready yet to winnow this down to less. And so that's where I thought, like, having it a little more comprehensive, and then as we talk to the organization and to different community groups, like, how are they sort of emphasizing the priorities? And then we come back to council and sort of say, here's how it shook out in those different conversations.
Can I ask you one question to that, though? How we're about to enter into the 2-year budget.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that discussion is, for all intents and purposes, is going to happen next Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
So how does today's discussion and what you're proposing, which is going to go beyond that, inform us in time for a week from now?
So it would not inform this year's budget, and we've already been clear about that. I think what we would see is we'll do an update in the second year of this budget based on, are there any changes to project allocations or things like that that need to occur because of the strategic plan adoption.
I'm actually very uncomfortable with, I thought that this was for like our internal, if what we're doing is putting something out to stakeholders and what they see is that we haven't prioritized Milpas or the arts or Casa de la Raza or different functions for the community, that would not be reflective of what I believe the organizations or any of our priorities would be. So I thought this was like icing on top of cake. And if we're getting down to, like, if we were doing a zero budget kind of building up, these would not be the things on my budget priority. So I think it's a little bit, I'm very concerned that this goes out to our community stakeholders to say, these are council priorities, when actually we have a whole lot of things that we're not willing to give up. Is this being like our workshopping, brainstorming, fine, but if we're talking about, this is going to go out to community stakeholders, I absolutely will change what my stickers are up there, all of them. And I don't need to add, I can take ones down and put other ones up, but that wasn't my understanding.
So
yeah.
In terms, and Kelly, jump in if you want to at any point. So going out and asking for input, we're talking about those 4 big buckets, and what is success like. So it's a similar activity. We can then see how things align. So we don't have to go out and say, council has identified these things. We can go out and say, what does success look like? What's important to you? And then we can compare that then to the areas of priority, need, and whatever from this discussion. And so we don't have to put you in a place where, it's like, well, what about all these other things, and have, upset residents.
It's not true. I would put different things.
Right.
It's not representative of what I would want.
Mm-hmm. Which is to Kelly's point, I think, about whether or not we should make sure we capture all of the.
I mean, I think now that, I just want to make sure that people don't feel like they missed some,
Right.
now I'm like sort of talking a little bit further about what this is and what it's supposed to evolve into. Is there anything that's missing?
Right, because what we don't want to have happen is we go through this whole process, and then, on the back end, it's like, well, what about this, this, and this? And then we're like, ooh, yeah. So we have lots of comments. And so I think, Megan, you were first on.
Weren't we only supposed to pick 3?
I was trying to get it focused.
Okay,
yes.
so, I mean, I have 10 things I want to do, but if I have to pick from the 10, I picked 3. Are we now saying we're supposed to put everything we want to do up there? That is a different question. Okay. Okay.
I thought this was the icing on top, but if we're talking core, fundamental things that aren't happening, that should be happening, I would pick a different 3, and I want to take mine off. Because there are things that just aren't even mentioned here. So.
Mayor.
I'll kind of go back to what Eric said. I mean, we're in the grocery store and we forgot our credit card because we've got this big laundry list, and there's a zillion things everybody wants to do and all like to see. But at the end of the day, our budget's going to be a photo finish for the next few years, and it's pretty obvious. This is in the report. So what we need to do is really, we need to winnow it down. We don't need to expand, because we could fill those buckets up. We could be here for 2 weeks filling those buckets up with little things that we wanted to do. But you go back to the Venn diagram with the politics versus the administrative part of it, and we're going to have a hell of a time getting to that middle section of the Venn diagram. So I think we really need to simplify and prioritize rather than just create a bigger wish list.
Well, okay, let me come back to that. Go ahead, Wendy.
I actually agree with Mayor Rouse and Councilmember Friedman. We have the budget coming up, as Councilmember Friedman said, for all intents and purposes, it gets adopted in 2 weeks. I think what would be helpful for all of us as an organization is, if it doesn't mean that we whittle these down and this is all we're going to focus on for the next 3 to 5 years, but I think it would be helpful for us to hear from our colleagues and even department heads or anybody else that wants to contribute during whatever time we have left. What are the things that we should be prioritizing in the next 1 to 2 years? Because that is what we're going to have to fund. And that is going to inform the votes and decisions, then the deliberations for next week on the 10th, and then, of course, for the subsequent adoption on the 17th.
Well, so correct me, Kelly, you might want to elaborate on this too, but we don't have the expectation that this strategic plan is going to be informing, this conversation will inform your conversation in the dais, no doubt, but it's not a one-to-one. It's not like now we're going to go fund the strategic plan. And I would just add, and I completely agree that you're going to have to, annually, and as you're creating a 2-year budget, say what are the things we're going to prioritize within this window. And not everything is going to make its way in subsequent budgets. But you're having a longer term plan so you don't lose sight of these things that have a horizon. And that's the value of a strategic plan, is that you have a longer view, a longer window. Still something that should live in a sphere of reasonableness and achievable. But it's a little bit, so it's a little bit of both. And so yeah, please, absolutely.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask really quick. I think it makes sense that this is a long-term strategic plan. I think because we're looking at what we're prioritizing in 5 years, in 3 years. We will have to create a work plan and a timeline for all of this stuff, right? Which is what our city administrator is going to be taking on with the department heads. But we basically, I think what Councilmember Friedman and Mayor Rouse were getting to, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but it's that we won't be able to really change or reevaluate what our priorities for the next 1 to 2 years are, because obviously this conversation extends far beyond our budget adoption. And if by then we decide, these are the things we narrowed it down, it's too late. We don't have funding allocated for that because we didn't have that conversation here. And so it's not to say that this has to inform our budget decisions, because it's literally in 2 weeks. But I think what would maybe be helpful is even just identifying a very, very rough timeline of what are things we want to focus on tangibly making happen and funding for the next 1 to 2 years, so that we can take care of the 3 to 5 year plan, if that makes sense.
I would just say, clearly this plan is not getting incorporated into the budget in 2 weeks. I will say, just because the council has said we have a 2-year financial plan does not mean we cannot make changes next fiscal year. So if there is something that comes out of this plan that is drastically different than what we're already doing, or a new initiative, we have the opportunity to add or change that for the fiscal year 27 budget. So I think there is that opportunity in the second year, not this first year.
Well, and perhaps, and maybe we talked about this afterwards too, with what we have here, summarizing and just giving at least the broad brushstrokes back to you, so you have that in view as you're adopting this year's budget, right? So that you know where there has been some energy and some consensus of movement, so that you're not just like, well, forget whatever happened on that day June 3rd. So you are using it, but it's more contextual to the adoption of the budget. It's like we said, we wanted to focus on, State Street, some process improvement relative to both business and housing. Like there are some things where there's some good energy around it. Some of the organizational investments, a thriving organization, are things that Kelly's going to be working on with her teams also. So it's not like these things don't have any traction. but we want to make sure that it's intentional and a thorough process to get you to a plan that you're like, yes, this makes sense for us for a horizon, not just an annual priority setting process.
And to just say in response, like, I think these are really helpful. And when we, even though we did these years ago and we keep working hard at them, I think then it sets the stage for our decision making. So like the local housing trust fund, after a couple of these workshops where it was like clear that over and over again, we kept saying housing was a priority, affordable housing, then that informed, like, even though it wasn't in the strategic plan, even though it wasn't actionable, then when that came up, it was like, well, we've all talked about how important housing is to us, so let's move forward with it. So I do think it helps decision making further down the line, and it helps to know what our colleagues are thinking in a rare opportunity where we can just speak with each other without process and voting.
Well, and I add, particularly in light of the fact that it's in 2 weeks, as you're having the conversation around the budget adoption, right? This conversation and the recognition that that's important, that's come up as something that demands time and attention and priority. That's something that you can keep and remind each other, hold each other accountable to that during your budget adoption process. Now, is it a plan that's longer term? Not yet. But clearly there's a need and a desire to move in that direction. So. Okay. Deep breath collectively. Trust the process. Okay. Well, so our next steps will be to summarize. First of all, I want to. You don't have to right now, but if you want to swap any of your other Post-its, I know that you did yours, but we're not on lockdown, so you can feel free to do that before we wrap up this afternoon. But what we'll do is we'll commit to summarizing this so you can see it, in a print form, to be like, oh, okay, that I can see what that looks like now. It makes more sense. It's hard when they're individual and reported out to you. We will bring those back. And so you have that opportunity to kind of reflect and identify if anything significant, either ongoing or of conversation, is missing. That will then inform us for our next steps. Okay. I feel the energy just like... I feel like maybe we have wound our course through here today. But I will tell you, and I know this is not easy, and I know that it can be frustrating, but in my view anyway, it was very productive and instructive. And so I hope you will see that once we get farther along the journey and you can see how this began, kind of the origin of our conversation. See, there we go, little modifications. And we'll be working closely with Kelly and her team, obviously, as we work through these next steps. So. Stay the course, trust the process. Maybe let's just do kind of quick around the table closing comments, and they can be sassy as you want them to be, that's fine, just for the record. Because I think it's helpful to be able to express where there's frustration so that we can offset that and mitigate it. So who would like to get us started closing comments? And I'm gonna ask you guys as well too. All right, thank you, Mike. Yeah, exactly. Get it done.
So you have to start this somehow, but I'm frustrated in the timing of this again. The same frustration I have with adopting a budget and then 6 months later doing millions and millions and millions of dollars of collective bargaining agreement decisions after you've already adopted the budget. And Eric alluded to this before. Everybody sitting in this room will adopt a budget in May, and then by July be blowing the budget to heck because they're not following what they adopted 3 months earlier in budgetary increases. And same thing with this. I get it, you start sometime, but to do this effectively, I think you should be doing this at some point in time ahead of the next budget. Not this far ahead, but closer ahead of the next. But,
the next one.
Right? Not July of 2027.
Yeah, totally.
Right? But but because it's a little frustrating then to watch the energy go down to that level because you realize, oh, the budget. I already knew the budget was cooked for the next year, but the budget on the second year out. Well, this is all back to snap in time, photograph and the world could end and be redeveloped some other way than anything you see up on that board, so it's all meaningless. So, so I wish that you figure out when that is, and you come back and do this again. And I like maybe what I heard anyhow, but I like a double track on this, because I think if you do it once a year, or even if you do it twice a year, there's still 5 months in between those two periods. Stuff changes. I mean, half a community gets destroyed by a fire, and now you can go out to any meeting and just say the word fire and get everybody's attention for 2 hours. Okay? Yep. And so that's a situation that didn't exist 10 years ago or 5 years ago, even 2 years ago, and never let a good fire go to waste, right? So you have the opportunity. But so it needs to happen frequently enough and at a time enough where you can actually have an effect on the outcome. And then I like kind of what I heard on a double track, that talking about stuff 3 to 5 years in might be good management, but it's just, it's another lifetime away. There's a ton of stuff up on that board, on the housing one especially, that a good number of people on these two tables want to happen right now, and are going to be pushing for right now. And it shouldn't be on those boards. I mean, yeah, it kind of meets the what would you like to see in 3 to 5 years.
Right.
There's a bunch of people sitting in here that want to see that tomorrow. And so it's the context of that does not belong on these sheets at all. And so it'd be nice to have a dual line conversation on what's your immediate goals, and let's talk about those, and then talk about, well, define those and define your steps to get to those goals, and see what the agreement or disagreement is and how you can work with that. And then let's do the same for stuff that is not immediate. And it all kind of gets jumbled up in this rush to, we want some things done tomorrow, and some of these other things, I could see we work on that for however long. So
no, totally fair comments. And what I would say with the short term, like now, ready to go yesterday, versus the longer term, is in a plan. I mean, some of these things may fall off by the time we finalize the strategic plan. Other things may be close, and that's okay. Like to have, the near term, the work plan will distinguish, what is your one priority, let's get it done, and what are the things that can wait. So, but
the benefit to talking about the nows are the most internally contentious ones also, compared to I mean, I've heard multiple people say, oh, we all agree on the housing trust fund. No, we don't. We agree on the concept of the housing trust fund. We don't agree on the pathway or the now versus how long it, or building up support over a period of time. And so by having to do it this way, where you're combining some people who want it for now, some people who want it 3 to 5 years from now, you've cast this presumption of expectation that we all agree on the same thing, and we don't agree on the same thing.
So I would actually say that by naming it, when there is not agreement, it names it so that you can actually say, this is a priority, we got to figure this out. What does this mean? Like, how are we going to do this? And not having it here, it'll just float anyway. It's going to happen anyway. And so naming it here gives you the space to say, this is a top priority. We want this to happen. We may disagree on what it looks like, but we're going to have to put in the time, put in the energy, figure out what the opportunity costs are or the alternatives, and decide. And so that's the, I think, advantage of naming it in there, even if it may look different, depending on where you sit. Here. Oops. Yeah.
Sorry, I have to run out, so I'm just gonna. Thank you. I think I honestly don't really know what I think. I think there's a lot of things that are exciting about seeing everything that we share. I think I am still struggling, as I always do when we have these workshops, to find what is a true shared anchoring principle for us in our decision making week after week. Because to Mike's point, I don't think that there is agreement. I mean, maybe State Street is a priority for me today, but only insofar as the action items align with what I hope to see on State Street, which might be very different from what potentially the mayor wants to see. And the work plan around those two different visions are very different and very different in terms of finances and time intensity. So I still don't feel that I have an anchoring principle on what our shared vision is, because there is so much that separates us, as there should be. And I'm wondering if maybe we're trying to get at something that doesn't really exist. And, do we need to have that? Is it even possible to have that shared anchoring vision? Maybe what we need to continually anchor ourselves in, to Councilmember Friedman's point, is the only sort of thing that's real, which is the budget. Maybe that has to be our anchoring principle, and then we go back and make decisions based on that. But I just really do struggle with this, because I know that my vision of these things are very different from, and it's not that's not without impact, because my version comes with real costs and comes with real time allocations. And if we were to go a different direction, I don't know that would be my priority anymore. So I don't know. I really don't know where to go, I guess.
Yeah, I guess I would well, go ahead. You go ahead first. And then Mayor was next. And because you have to leave, right?
But also, really, I think there's a lot that's really exciting. Sorry, I didn't want to end on a bad note. That was so negative. There's a lot that's really great. I tried to just,
Go ahead, Mayor.
Anyway, so I'll actually agree with Ms. Harmon, so somebody write that down. I'm agreeing with Ms. Harmon today. But this is the anchoring principle. Nothing happens without this. And maybe what should have been done, or maybe for a future thing, is to go through these kind of analyses with the finance department. I know that Keith presented the budget, but and it was clear to me, but obviously not clear to everybody, that what we're doing today doesn't relate to this year's budget. But when it comes to even future ideas, what's going to happen in 3 to 5 years, this is a 5-year projection. And this has got to be the guiding principle, because nothing happens without this. And right now, we're looking at softer sales taxes, and we're looking at potentially reduced TOT from foreign tourism. We're looking at a lot of things. So we have to be pretty careful about how we do and what we project out and what we think we can do and what we can think we can dedicate money to. And what we also need to have is some modeling. What does each $1 million increment mean to housing production if we're using the local housing task force? We're talking about these big picture things, but we don't really know dollar for dollar what that means. And without that, we're just doing our wish list, we're flapping in the breeze, but we don't really have a hand on what we can possibly do even 3 to 5 years down the road. So I think that kind of modeling, and maybe even a pre-analysis meeting of something along these lines because unfortunately Mr. DeMartini's projections have been pretty spot on. And that's I guess good for Keith, but not good for the rest of us, because and so we need to have those tools.
Good news, bad news.
Yeah, before we go off and we start, throwing the pasta at the wall to see what sticks. And that's the kind of what I get the value of the exercise for a future thing, but in terms of our ability to actually attack a problem like housing, for example, we need to know precisely what those dollars mean. And right now we just think, well, we just need to dump something and see what happens. And I just think that's really unfair to our constituents and unfair to our staff, who we have to support first. We have to provide those services first. We have to run the city first. And we have to know that. And I think would help to have those tools.
And absolutely, this will circle back and be connected with the budget. I think the timing is unfortunate because, it's happening this week and then next week and the week after a budget adoption for this coming year. But I do think, starting this process, if we have a robust plan and a framework, then each year it's relatively easy during the budget process to say, okay, are these still the priorities? Do we change them? And how are some of the initiatives changing? And then how does that tie into the budget? And absolutely, this has to be tied to the budget.
So I would say that yes, the budget's the guiding principle, and we are spending a lot of money on all kinds of things. So to have the conversation about are we spending it in the right ways? Is that still the way we want to spend it? Is a good conversation. And I'm just thinking for my home budget. During COVID times, I spent a lot of money on Instacart. Do I still need to be spending money on Instacart? No, I can take myself to the grocery store now. That's the kind of thing. Like, the money is going. The money is going places. Is it going where we want it to go? And so I'm operating from the understanding that we're not talking about creating new funding to do new fancy things. We're doing a check-in. Are these still our priorities? And what I'm taking away from this is like clarity that yes, these are still our priorities as we're going into the budget deliberations. I'm going to feel more reassured, not just that these are our priorities, but there was discussion with department heads, with the organization. I feel more assured that we do need to be clearer with what our priorities are moving forward and not just on any given Tuesday kind of thing. I think you started with saying, that this is our plan without the unforeseens, that unforeseens happen. You need to have flexibility. And the big unforeseen that we're not talking so much about is on the national level. I mean, if we're looking at that maybe the Weather Service isn't going to tell us what disasters are coming our way, where FEMA might not come in and help us with our disasters, earthquake response, SNAP programs, all of the safety nets of our entire community that we all valued, that the community, they're all in jeopardy. I mean, deportations, decriminalization of our own residents. So if you put it in that framework, like what do you want to do with the insane situation that we're being faced with on the day-to-day changing tides? To me, that becomes a whole different conversation if we're talking about, okay, in the current bigger picture, what do we want to do? And to me also, it's coming down, and I think I sort of saw this pattern at the beginning of stability. I think that's what our staff wants. I think that's what the community wants, and it can come in any different ways. That's, paying our workers competitive wages. That brings stability to the organization, to the community, to emergency response, to teachers, to nurses, to our whole community. Protecting environment and resilience, that's also towards our stability. So there's nothing new, just keep really reaffirming what it is that we've been doing. Regional cooperation, strengthen that social safety net with our partners who all care about the same thing, the school district, city college, the county, we all care about the same things. Capitalize on that, not something new, but like stability. Let's stabilize before we start doing other crazy things. And even the economic vitality, if we could just stay stable, that would be amazing. So, before we're get to the most income we've ever made, how about first let's just get right with ourselves, get it so that businesses can be in those spaces, all of that. And stability in terms of the arts and our Milpas community, our really underrepresented community who is, they're afraid for their lives right now. So if I'm comparing that to do I want State Street shinier? That's not a comparison for me. So I think that underlying issue of the basic social structure and stability in that, I think needs to be the forefront of the conversation. And then for those reasons too, with the housing, we have a housing element. Let's follow our housing element. Let's talk about how to actually implement those lofty goals. We already put in place the local housing trust fund. We already said prioritize affordable housing and for low and very low income. We keep coming together to talk about priorities. Our priorities are there, and they're in our budget. They're already set in our budget. So if this just reaffirms that those are the things that are important to us. And I think rent stabilization fits in that too, with that whole concept of stability. I don't think what people are looking for right now is massive change and redirection and let's do something else. I think just in the context of the larger picture of what's happening nationally, I think just really committing to making what we have really stable is my takeaway. Closing thought.
Okay. Closing thoughts?
So much has been said. I don't want to reiterate, so I'm just going to focus on my one thing about making parking free. I think since we raised the sales tax, I think encouraging people by having free parking to come spend more money downtown will generate more tax revenue and therefore more funding to the general fund. And also having surface level retractable street barriers on State Street so that we can open and close the street as needed. I'm also willing to consider that. I think a combination of those two ideas will really stimulate the economic vitality of our community and provide money for some of the things that are up there. That's what I gotta say.
Okay.
So I'll try to be brief. The positives the positives is of the city organization is that we have an outstanding staff at all levels, not just in this room. It's from they're professional and dedicated at all levels to service delivery, and I think that's proven time and time again with everything that we're doing to the services that the public's getting every day. The challenge, one of the greatest challenges we'll face, is how do we retain those staff, and how do we recruit new staff, housing, but also other issues that lead to them leaving the organization. Also, each of the areas identified today, the positives are most of them have already and are undergoing a lot of great work and efforts. Housing, there's a lot going on. Budgeting, we have a great finance department over the last few years. The budget process has been more public, transparent. It's far beyond what it was when we first started. Chris and I, you get one book at the beginning of the year and that's it, at the beginning of the budget, and that was it. It's come such a long way, and that benefits the public and us. Public safety, a lot of great work going on there. And we're building momentum on everything, sustainability, libraries, parks. So there's a lot going on in the positive. But the challenges, the budget forecast speaks for itself going out into the 5-year plan. Next year, it's going to be an anomaly with a projected surplus, but that has to be measured because of the outgoing years. Our reserves, regardless of whether we change the policy or not, if you bring them down even a couple percent within one more year, so by fiscal year 27, you would already be below the target if you dropped it below what it is now. And then if you keep going in the trajectory, we have to figure out a way to ensure that we have those reserves, no matter what level they're at. And then self-insurance, insurance is a huge issue. And those are things that they're boring. They're not something that the public really wants to engage. These are the things that affect their everyday lives, but the costs are just going up, especially with insurance. Like I said, like I was talking with Keith the other day, Keith DeMartini, and we were projecting that the insurance on the wharf it went from $250,000 just like a few years ago for the deductible. It's $1 million today. It's projected to go to $3 million in a couple years, and it's looking like that could actually be this next budget year. So $3 million if something happens on the wharf that we would have to cover before we even have any insurance coming in. And with climate change and sea level rise, the chances of that happening increase. So those are all things within the budget that we have to understand, because we don't have an option not to pay for those. And they affect our ability. And when you look at budgeting overall, whether it's the county or the cities, even if you did a zero-based budgeting and you try to rebuild it, all the costs are pretty much baked in, and you're talking about a very small discretionary amount. Because when you look at public safety, we're funding public safety, and you're not gonna change that because it's staffing. We're not gonna change the staffing in our public works department. Those are the costs because they're baked into contracts that we have to honor. And so when you talk about all these and what our priorities are, you have to look at it in what is the actual discretionary revenue that we have. And it's a lot less than the public understands it. Even at the county, they have a $1.5 billion budget, and they're talking about a few $1 million every year in discretionary. And we're kind of the same. We have just a couple $1 million at the end of the day to address all these in a different way. So that's the way we should look at it, is not where we want to be, but what is that small amount, and what changes do we have that we want in there. And then the other thing too is for housing, we're being asked to be held accountable for the Local Housing Trust Fund, for Measure I, investing in housing, even though we're not a housing provider, and we should be, rightfully. But there isn't an accountability or the questions being asked of our actual housing providers. And I think there needs to be more light shed on why does it cost $1 million to produce 1 unit of housing? What goes into, I don't know, I can't tell you. Why does it cost $1 million to produce 1 unit of deed restricted affordable housing? I'm sure there's reasons for it, but is there any way on their end they could reduce those costs? Is there any way on our end, through our processing, we could reduce those costs? But that conversation, to my knowledge, is not taking place on that. And if we're going to invest more into that, we need to know that maybe there might be other ways. There might be a number of different housing providers that could provide housing at a cheaper cost. I mean, Dignity Moves, that project was not $1 million per unit to get those units on there. So those are things we should be looking at that could stretch those dollars, rather than just let's put some money in and let it go. We need to make sure that if we go down that route, those questions have been answered, and that it's publicly available why it costs $1 million a unit, because I have strong concerns with that. And then at the end of the day, I'll just wrap up that there's a lot to be positive for and think about all we're doing, but to Councilmember Sneddon's point, with the volatility on the national scene, the tariffs, those could impact our cost of business. We just have to make sure that we're measured in our approach, and that we're able to withstand anything on our end, and that we budget our finances accordingly, especially if there's natural disasters and we don't receive funding like we did in the past. So we have a lot to go in the next couple of weeks, a lot to be heard.
Timing is everything here, right? Any closing comments, Wendy?
Yeah, I'll try to be brief. I think similar to what Councilmember Friedman is saying, I really believe we need to be intentional about being realistic with our short-term and long-term expectations. We have, is this on? Yeah, it is. I think a workshop like this is a good brain exercise, but especially for us as council members, we were placed here by constituents to advocate for their quality of life and for their safety. And, most of us, all of us who are elected, who are the only ones put in by the residents who pay these tax dollars, each of us is only here for X amount of years. And these strategic plans, while they're good to give sort of an anchoring point to the organization, regardless of the change in leadership, it's still important for all of us to do what we can to implement this stuff as soon as possible. I don't want to fall into the mentality of, let's just think about this for, later. If we can get some of this stuff done now, we should be doing it now. Most of us sit on other committees, on ordinance, on finance. I sit on finance. I'm taking a very close look at our budget, because there's a lot of these things that just can't wait, mostly because of the volatility at the national level. And so I think this is a really good thing for us to inform our very long-term goals, which is what the purpose of this was. So that was great. I think for us, I'll speak for myself. For me personally, I want to be very practical with what we are doing. I am hoping that we could have a similar session to this shortly down the road, where we can talk about the practicality of things and really truly look at opportunity cost of getting some of these things done, because while I agree this should go out to community stakeholders and get their input, you're gonna keep hearing the same stuff. I mean, us as council members, when we bring these priorities up, it's not, at least for me, it's not because I feel like saying that, right? It's because we have constituents come up and say, this is what we want. So, but in any case, I think it's our duty to carry these things out as efficiently as possible along with our city staff. And I think especially with the uncertainty and the literal just loss of funding of millions of dollars that we're seeing, we need to be both flexible, but we also have to be very responsible with our local funds to make sure that we are resilient and we can withstand even the end of these 3 to 5 years, right? So I don't want to end it on a bad note, but I do think this was a very productive conversation. And like others have said, it's actually very encouraging because a lot of this stuff, I know that we may not agree exactly on how to get there, but we're agreeing on what we want to get to. And so I think the sooner that we have the conversation on how to get there, I think, the sooner we'll find a solution. So.
And keeping in mind that where we want to go, policy sets the direction, and then how we're going to get there needs to be informed by staff, right? It needs to be the combination, team sport. Any closing thoughts, Kelly, before we wrap up? Okay. All right, well, we will call that a day. Thank you so much for being so involved and taking us through it, and we will see you next time.
Do we want to talk about next steps real quick? Yeah, sorry.
Sure.
Okay.
Do we have the, oopsie, are you pulling it up too? All right, so we're going to round out the next steps for everybody. So then, sorry, I've already said go ahead and go. Guys, so next steps, we will synthesize and summarize the work of today. We'll bring that back through Kelly so you can put fresh eyes on that before we convene in our engagement activities. But the idea is to test the ideas, see what resonates, what's highest priority, what's the biggest need. And that includes through staff, right? To be able to understand what are the priority projects, what are the things that are either underway or support these efforts. So we'll gather those and then bring that back to council to review in the goal then of finalizing the strategic plan document. So that will include the full framework, including the strategies, priorities within there. That's something that ultimately you will have an opportunity to weigh in and adopt, and that will then provide direction for Kelly and the team to bring that forward to you, make progress. So, all right, thanks you guys.